Chapter 19. The Abbé du Bois. All the world knows the commencement of the Abbé du Bois. We will not enlarge on the history of his youth, which may be found in the memoirs of the time, and particularly in those of the implacable Saint Simon. Du Bois has not been calumniated. It was impossible, but all the evil has been told of him, and not quite all the good. There was in his antecedents and in those of Alberoni, his rival, a great resemblance, but the genius was on the side of Du Bois. And in the long struggle with Spain, which the nature of our subject does not allow us to do more than indicate, all the advantage was with the son of the apothecary over the son of the gardener. Du Bois preceded Figaro, to whom he probably served as type. But more fortunate than he passed from the office to the drawing room, and from the drawing room to the court. All these successive advantages were the rewards of various services, private or public. His last negotiation was his chef d'oeuvre. It was more than the ratification of the Treaty of Utrecht. It was a treaty more advantageous still for France. The emperor not only renounced all right to crown of Spain, as Philip V had renounced all as the crown of France, but he entered, with England and Holland, into a league formed at once against Spain on the south and against Sweden and Russia on the north. The division of the 5 or 6 great states of Europe was established by this treaty on so solid and just a basis that, after 100 years of wars and revolutions, all these states, except the empire, remain in the same situation that they then were. On his part, the regent, not very particular by nature, loved this man, who had educated him and whose fortune he had made. The regent appreciated in Du Bois the talents he had, and was not too severe on the vices from which he was not exempt. There was, however, between the regent and Du Bois an abyss. The regent's vices and virtues were those of a gentleman, Du Bois those of a lackey. In vain the regent said to him, at each new favor that he granted, Du Bois, take care, it is only a livery coat that I am putting on your back. Du Bois, who cared about the gift and not about the manner in which it was given, replied, with that apish grimace which belonged to him, I am your valet, Monseigneur. Dress me always the same. Du Bois, however, loved the regent and was devoted to him. He felt that this powerful hand alone had raised him from the sink in which he had been found, and to which, hated and despised as he was by all, a sign from the master might restore him. He watched with a personal interest the hatreds and plots which might reach the prince, and more than once, by the aid of a police often better managed than that of the lieutenant general, and which extended, by means of Madame de Tenson, into the highest aristocracy, and, by means of La Filin, to the lowest grades of society, he had defeated conspiracies of which Messire Voyer d'Argenson had not even heard a whisper. Therefore the regent, who appreciated the services which Du Bois had rendered him, and could still render him, received the ambassador with open arms. As soon as he saw him appear, he rose, and, contrary to the custom of most princes, who depreciate the service in order to diminish the reward, Du Bois, said he joyously, you are my best friend, and the Treaty of the Quadruple Alliance will be more profitable to King Louis XV than all the victories of his ancestor, Louis XIV. Bravo, said Du Bois. You do me justice, Monseigneur, but unluckily, everyone is not equally grateful. Ah, said the regent. Have you met my mother? She has just left the room. And how is His Majesty? Asked Du Bois, with a smile full of a detestable hope. He was very poorly when I left. Well, Abbé, very well, answered the prince gravely. God will preserve him to us, I hope, for the happiness of France, and the shame of our calumniators. And Monseigneur sees him every day as usual? I saw him yesterday, and I even spoke to him of you. Bah! And what did you tell him? I told him that in all probability you had just secured the tranquility of his reign. And what did the king answer? What did he answer? He answered, my friend, that he did not think abbés were so useful. His Majesty is very witty, and old Villeroy was there, without doubt, as he always is. With your permission, I must send that old fellow to look for me at the other end of France some fine morning. His insolence to you begins to tire my patience. Leave him alone. Du Bois, leave him alone. Everything will come in time. Even my archbishopric. Ha! What is this new folly? New folly, Monseigneur. On my honor, nothing could be more serious. Oh, This letter from the King of England, which asks me for an archbishopric for you. Did your highness not recognize the style? You dictated it, you rascal, to Nericall Destuches, who got the king to sign it. And the king signed it as it is, without saying anything? Exactly. You wish, said he to our poet, that a Protestant prince should interfere to make an archbishop in France. The regent will read my recommendation, will laugh at it, and pay no attention to it. Yes, yes, sire, replied Destuches, who has more wit than he puts into his verses. The regent will laugh at it, but after all will do what your majesty asks. Destuches lied. Destuches never spoke more truly, Monseigneur. You an archbishop. King George would deserve that. In return, I should point out to him some rascal like you for the archbishopric of York when it becomes vacant. I defy you to find my equal. I know but one man. And who is he? I should like to know him. Oh, it is useless. He is already placed, and as his place is good, he would not change it for all the archbishoprics in the world. Insolent. With whom are you angry, Monseigneur? With a fellow who wants to be an archbishop, and who has never yet officiated at the communion table. I shall be all the better prepared. But the archdeaconship, the priesthood. Bah, we will find somebody, some second Jean de Meurs, who will dispatch all that in an hour. I defy you to find him. It is already done. And who is that? Your first almoner, the Bishop of Nantes, Tresan. The fellow has an answer for everything, but your marriage? My marriage. Yes, Madame Du Bois. Madame Du Bois. Who is that? What? Fellow, have you assassinated her? Monseigneur forgets that it is only 3 days since he gave her quarter's pension. And if she should oppose your archbishopric? I defy her. She has no proofs. She may get a copy of the marriage certificate. There is no copy without an original. And the original? Here it is, said Du Bois, drawing from his pocket a little paper, containing a pinch of ashes. What? And are you not afraid that I shall send you to the galleys? If you wish to do so, now is the time, for I hear the lieutenant of police speaking in the antechamber. Who sent for him? I did. What for? To find fault with him. For what reason? You will hear. It is understood, then, I am an archbishop. And have you already chosen your archbishopric? Yes, I take Cambrai. Peste, you are not modest. Oh, mon Dieu! It is not for the profit. It is for the honor of succeeding Fenelon. Shall we have a new Telemachus? Yes, if your highness will find me a Penelope in the kingdom. Apropos of Penelope, you know that Madame de Sabrin. I know all. Ah, Abbé, your police, then, is as good as ever. You shall judge. Du Bois stretched out his hand, rang the bell, and a messenger appeared. Send the lieutenant general, said Du Bois. But, Abbé, it seems to me that it is you who give orders here now. It is for your good. Monseigneur, let me do it. Well, well, said the regent, one must be indulgent to newcomers. Messire Voyer Dargenson entered. He was as ugly as Du Bois, but his ugliness was of a very different kind. He was tall, thick, and heavy, wore an immense wig, had great bushy eyebrows, and was invariably taken for the devil by children who saw him for the first time. But with all this, he was supple, active, skillful, intriguing, and fulfilled his office conscientiously, when he was not turned from his nocturnal duties by other occupations. Messire Dargenson, said Du Bois, without even leaving the lieutenant general time to finish his bow, Monseigneur, who has no secrets for me, has sent for you, that you may tell me in what costume he went out last night, in whose house he passed the evening, and what happened to him on leaving it. I should not need to ask these questions if I had not just arrived from London. You understand that as I travel post from Calais, I can know nothing of them. But, said Dargenson, who thought these questions concealed some snare, did anything extraordinary happen last evening? I confess I received no report. I hope no accident happened to Monseigneur. Oh, no, none. Only Monseigneur, who went out at 8 o'clock in the evening as a French guard to sup with Madame de Sabrin, was nearly carried off on leaving her house. Carried off? cried Dargenson, turning pale, while the regent could not restrain a cry of astonishment. Carried off? And by whom? Ah, said Du Bois, that is what we do not know, and what you ought to know, Messire Dargenson, if you had not passed your time at the convent of the Madeleine de Tresnel. What, Dargenson? You, a great magistrate, give such an example, said the regent, laughing. Never mind. I will receive you well if you come, as you've already done in the time of the late king, to bring me, at the end of the year, a journal of my acts. Monseigneur, said the lieutenant, stammering, I hope your highness does not believe a word of what the Abbé Du Bois says. What? Instead of being humiliated by your ignorance, you give me the lie. Monseigneur, I will take you to Dargenson Seraglio, an abbess of 26 and novices of 15, a boudoir in India chintz, and cells hung with tapestry. Oh, Monsieur le Lieutenant of Police knows how to do things well. The regent held his side with laughing, seeing Dargenson's disturbed face. But, replied the lieutenant of police, try to bring back the conversation to the less disagreeable, though more humiliating subject. There is not much merit, Abbé, in your knowing the details of an event, which, doubtless, Monseigneur himself told you. On my honor, said the regent, I did not tell him a single word. Listen, lieutenant. Is it Monseigneur also who told me the story of the novice of the Faubourg Saint-Marceau, whom you so nearly carried off over convent walls? Is it Monseigneur who told me of that house which you had built under a false name against the wall of the convent of the Madeleine, so that you can enter at all hours by a door hidden in a closet, and which opens on to the sacristy of the chapel of St. Mark, your patron? No, no, all that, my dear lieutenant, is the infancy of the art, and you only knew this would not, I hope, be worthy to hold a candle to you. Listen, Abbé, replied the lieutenant of police with a grave air. If all you have told me about Monseigneur is true, the thing is serious, and I am in the wrong not to know it, if anyone does. But there is no time lost. We will find the culprits and punish them as they deserve. But, said the regent, you must not attach too much importance to this. They were, probably, some drunken officers who wished to amuse their companions. It is a conspiracy, Monseigneur, replied Du Bois, which emanates from the Spanish embassy, passing through the arsenal before it arrives at the Palais Royal. Again, Du Bois? Always, Monseigneur. And you, Dargenson, what is your opinion? That your enemies are capable of anything, Monseigneur, but that we will mar their plots, whatever they may be, I give you my word. At this moment the door opened, and the Duc de Maine was announced, who came to attend the council, and whose privilege it was, as Prince of the Blood, not to be kept waiting. He advanced with that timid and uneasy air which was natural to him, casting a side glance over 3 persons in whose presence he found himself, as though to discover what subject occupied them at his entrance. The regent understood his thought. Welcome, my cousin, said he. These 2 bad fellows, whom you know, have just been assuring me that you are conspiring against me. The Duc de Maine turned as pale as death, and was obliged to lean for support on the crutch-shaped stick which he carried. And I hope, Monseigneur, replied he, in a voice which he vainly endeavored to render firm, that you did not give ear to such a calumny. Oh, mon Dieu! No, replied the regent negligently. But they are obstinate, and declare that they will take you one day in the fact. I do not believe it, but at any rate I give you warning. Be on your guard against them, for they are clever fellows, I warrant you. The Duc de Maine opened his mouth to give some contemptible excuse, when the door opened again, and the groom announced successively the Duc de Bourbon, the Prince de Conti, the Duc de Saint-Simon, the Duc de Guiche, captain of the guards, the Duc Noailles, president of the Council of Finance, the Duc Danton, superintendent of ships, the Marshal d'Aiguezelles, president of the Council of Foreign Affairs, the Archbishop of Troyes, the Marquis de Lavreliere, the Marquis d'Iaflat, the Duc de la Force, the Marquis de Torquay, and the Marshals de Villeroy, d'Estrées, de Villers, and de Bezins. As these grave personages were gathered together to deliberate upon the Treaty of the Quadruple Alliance, brought from London by Du Bois, and as the Treaty of the Quadruple Alliance only figures secondarily in this history, our readers will excuse our leaving the sumptuous reception room in the Palais Royal to lead them back to the attic in the Rue du Temps Perdu. Chapter 20. The Conspiracy. Harmental, after having placed his hat and cloak on a chair, after having placed his pistols on his table and his sword under his pillow, threw himself dressed onto his bed. And more happy than Damocles, he slept, though, like Damocles, a sword hung over his head by a thread. When he awoke, it was broad daylight, and as the evening before he had forgotten to close his shutters, the first thing he saw was a ray of sunshine playing joyously across his room. Harmental thought that he had been dreaming, when he found himself again calm and tranquil in his little room, so neat and clean, while he might have been at that hour in some gloomy and somber prison. For a moment he doubted of its reality, remembering all that had passed the evening before. But all was there: the red ribbon, the hat and cloak in the chair, the pistols on the table, and the sword under the pillow, and as a last proof, he himself in the costume of the day before, which he had not taken off, for fear of being surprised by some nocturnal visit. Harmental jumped from his bed. His first look was for his neighbor's window. It was already open, and he saw Bathilde passing and repassing in her room. The second was for his glass, which told him that conspiracy suited him. Indeed, his face was paler than usual, and therefore more interesting. His eyes were rather feverish, and therefore more expressive, so that it was evident that, when he had smoothed his hair and arranged his collar and cravat, he would be a most interesting person to Bathilde. Harmental did not say this, even to himself, but the bad instinct which always impels our poor souls to evil whispered these thoughts to him, so that when he went to his toilet, he suited his dress to the expression of his face. That is to say, that he dressed entirely in black, that his hair was arranged with charming negligence, and that he left his waistcoat more than usually open, to give place to his shirt frill, which fell with an ease full of coquetry. All this was done in the most preoccupied and careless manner in the world, for Harmental, brave as he was, could not help remembering that at any minute he might be arrested, but it was by instinct that, when the Chevalier gave the last look in the glass, before leaving his little dressing-room, he smiled at himself with melancholy which doubled the charm of his countenance. There was no mistake as to the meaning of this smile, for he went directly to the window. Perhaps Bathilde had also her projects for the moment when her neighbor should reappear. Perhaps she had arranged a defense which should consist in not looking toward him or in closing her window after a simple recognition. But at the noise her neighbor's window made an opening, all was forgotten, and she ran to the window, crying out, "Ah, there you are! Mon Dieu, monsieur, how anxious you have made me!" This exclamation was 10 times more than Harmental had hoped for, if he on his part had prepared some well-turned and eloquent phrases. They were all forgotten in clasping his hands. "Bathilde, Bathilde," he cried, "you are, then, as good as you are beautiful." "Why, good?" asked Bathilde. "Did you not tell me that if I was an orphan, you also were without parents? Did you not say that I was your sister, and you were my brother? Then, Bathilde, you prayed for me?" "All night," replied the young girl, blushing. "And I thanked chance for having saved me, when I owed all to an angel's prayers." "The danger is then past," cried Bathilde. "The night was dark and gloomy," replied Harmental. "This morning, however, I was awakened by a ray of sunshine which a cloud may again conceal. So it is of the danger I have run. It is past to give place to a great happiness, that of knowing you have thought of me, yet it may return. But stay," continued he, hearing steps on the staircase. "There it is, perhaps, approaching my door." As he spoke, someone knocked 3 times at the Chevalier's door. "Who is there?" asked Harmental from the window, in a voice which, in spite of all his firmness, betrayed some emotion. "A friend," answered a voice. "Well?" asked Bathilde with anxiety. "Thanks to you, God still continues to protect me. It is a friend who knocks." "Once again, thanks, Bathilde." And the Chevalier closed his window, sending the young girl a last salute which was very like a kiss. Then he opened to the Abbé Brigaud, who, beginning to be impatient, had knocked a second time. "Well," said the abbé, on whose face it was impossible to see the smallest change, "what has happened, then, my dear pupil, that you are shut in thus by bolts and bars? Is it as a foretaste of the Bastille?" "Holla, abbé," said Harmental in a cheerful voice, "no such jokes, I beg. They might bring misfortune." "But look, look," said Brigaud, throwing his eyes round him. "Would not any one suppose they were visiting a conspirator? Pistols on the table, a sword on the pillow, and a hat and cloak on the chair. Ah, my dear pupil, you are discomposed, it appears to me. Come, put all this in order, that I may not be able to perceive, when I pay my paternal visit, what passes during my absence. Harmental obeyed, admiring, in this man of the church, the sang-froid which he himself found it difficult to attain. Very good, said Brigod, watching him. And this shoulder knot which you have forgotten, and which was never made for you, for it dates in the time when you were in jackets. Put it away, too, who knows? You may want it. And what for, Abbé? Asked Harmental, laughing. To attend the Regent's levee-in? Oh, no, but for a signal to some good fellow who is passing. Come, put away. My dear Abbé, said Harmental, if you are not the devil in person, you are at least one of his most intimate acquaintances. Oh, no, I am a poor fellow who goes his own quiet way, and who, as he goes, looks high and low, right and left, that is all. Look, there's a ray of spring, the first, which knocks humbly at your window, and you do not open it. One would suppose you were afraid of being seen. Ah, pardon, I did not know that, when your window opened, another must close. My dear Abbé, you are full of wit, replied Harmental, but terribly indiscreet. So much so that, if you were a musketeer instead of an abbé, I should quarrel with you. And why? Because I wish to open you a path to glory, fortune, and perhaps love? It would be monstrous ingratitude. Well, let us be friends, Abbé, said Harmental, offering his hand, and I shall not be sorry to have some news. Of what? How do I know? Of the Rue de Bones en Fawn, where there's a great deal going on, I believe. Of the Arsenal, where I believe Madame de Maine is giving a soirée, and even of the Regent, who, if I may believe a dream I had, came back to Palais Royal very late and rather agitated. All has gone well. The noise of the Rue de Bones en Fawn, if there were any, is quite calm this morning. Madame de Maine has as much gratitude for those whom important affairs kept away from the Arsenal as she has contempt for those who were there. Finally, the Regent, dreaming last night, as usual, that he was King of France, has already forgotten that he was nearly the prisoner of the King of Spain. Now we must begin again. Ah, pardon, Abbé, said Harmental, but, with your permission, it is the turn of the others. I shall not be sorry to rest a little myself. Ah, that goes badly with the news I bring you. What news? It was decided last night that you should leave for Brittany this morning. For Brittany, and what to do there, you will know when you are there. And if I do not wish to go, you will reflect and go just the same. And on what shall I reflect? That it would be the act of a madman to interrupt an enterprise near its end for a love only at its beginning, to abandon the interests of a princess of the blood, to gain the good graces of a grisette. Abbé, said Harmental. Oh, we must not get angry. My dear Chevalier, we must reason. You engage voluntarily in the affair we have in hand, and you promise to aid us in it. Would it be loyal to abandon us now for repulse? No, no. My dear pupil, you must have a little more connection in your ideas if you mix in conspiracy. It is just because I have connection in my ideas, replied Harmental, that this time, as at first, before undertaking anything new, I wish to know what it is. I offer myself to be the arm, it is true, but before striking, the arm must know what the head has decided. I risk my liberty. I risk my life. I risk something perhaps dearer to me still. I will risk all this in my own manner, with my eyes open and not closed. Tell me first what I am to do in Brittany, and then perhaps I will go there. Your orders are that you should go to Rennes. There you will unseal this letter and find your instructions. My orders, my instructions. Are not these the terms which a general uses to his officers? And are they in the habit of disputing the commands they receive? Not when they're in the service. But you know I am in it no longer. It is true. I forgot to tell you that you had re-entered it. Yes, you. I have your brevet in my pocket. And Brigod drew from his pocket a parchment, which he presented to Harmental, who unfolded it slowly, questioning Brigod with his looks. A brevet, cried the Chevalier. A brevet as colonel in one of the 4 regiments of carabineers. Whence comes this brevet? Look at the signature. Louis Auguste Duc de Maine. Well, what is there astonishing in that? As Grand Master of Artillery, he has the nomination of 12 regiments. He gives you one to replace that which was taken from you. And as your general, he sends you on a mission. Is it customary for soldiers in such a case to refuse the honor their chief does them in thinking of them? I am a churchman and do not know. No, no, my dear Abbé. It is, on the contrary, the duty of every officer of the king to obey his chief. Besides which, replied Brigard negligently, in case the conspiracy failed, you would only have obeyed orders and might throw the whole responsibility of your actions on another. Abbé, cried Darmental a second time. Well, if you do not go, I shall make you feel the spur. Yes, I am going. Excuse me, but there are some moments when I am half mad. I am now at the orders of Monsieur de Maine, or, rather, at those of Madame. May I not see her before I go, to fall at her feet, and tell her that I am ready to sacrifice my life at a word from her? There now, you are going to the opposite extreme. But no, you must not die. You must live to triumph over our enemies, and wear a beautiful uniform, with which you will turn all the women's heads. Oh, my dear Brigard, there is but one I wish to please. Well, you shall please her first, and the others afterward. When must I go? This instant. You will give me half an hour? Not a second. But I have not breakfasted. You shall come and breakfast with me. I have only 2,000 or 3,000 francs here, and that is not enough. You will find a year's pay in your carriage. And clothes? Your trunks are full. Had I not your measure? You will not be discontented with my tailor. But at least, Abbé, tell me when I may return. In 6 weeks to a day, the Duchesse de Maine will expect you at Sceaux. But at least you will permit me to write a couple lines. Well, I will not be too exacting. The Chevalier sat down and wrote, Dear Bathilde, today it is more than a danger which threatens me. It is a misfortune which overtakes me. I am forced to leave this instant, without seeing you, without bidding you adieu. I shall be 6 weeks absent. In the name of heaven, Bathilde, do not forget him who will not pass an hour without thinking of you. Raoul. This letter written, folded, and sealed, the Chevalier rose and went to the window. But as we have said, that of his neighbor was closed when Brigard appeared. There was then no means of sending to Bathilde the dispatch destined for her. Darmental made an impatient gesture. At this moment, they heard a scratching at the door. The Abbé opened it, and Mirza appeared, guided by her instinct and her greediness, to give her the bonbons and making lively demonstrations of joy. Well, said Brigard, who shall say God is not good to lovers? You want a messenger, and here is one. Abbé, said Darmental, shaking his head, do not enter into my secrets before I wish it. Oh, replied Brigard, a confessor, you know, is an abyss. Then not a word will pass your lips? On my honor, Chevalier. Darmental tied the letter to Mirza's neck, gave her a piece of sugar as a reward for the commission she was about to accomplish, and, half sad at having lost his beautiful neighbor for 6 weeks, half glad at having regained forever his beautiful uniform, he took his money, put his pistols into his pockets, fastened on his sword, took his hat and cloak, and followed the Abbé Brigard. Chapter 21. The Order of the Honey Bee. At the appointed day and hour, that is to say, 6 weeks after his departure from the capital, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Darmental, returning from Brittany, entered the courtyard of the Palace of Sceaux, with his post horses going at full gallop. Servants in full livery waited on the doorstep, and everything announced preparations for a fete. Darmental entered, crossed the hall, and found himself in a large room, where about 20 people were assembled, standing in groups talking, while waiting for the mistress of the house. There were, among others, the Comte de Laval, the Marquis de Pompadour, the poet Saint-Genest, the old Abbé Chaulu, Saint-Hilaire, Madame de Rohan, Madame de Croissy, Madame de Cheros, and Madame de Brissac. Darmental went straight to the Marquis de Pompadour, the one out of all this noble and intelligent society with whom he was best acquainted. They shook hands. Then Darmental, drawing him aside, said, My dear Marquis, Can you tell me how it is that where I expected to find only a dull political assembly, I find preparations for a fate? My foi, I do not know, my dear Chevalier, replied Pompadour, and I am as astonished as you are. I have just returned from Normandy myself. Ah, you also have just arrived. This instant I asked the same question of Laval, but he has just arrived from Switzerland and knows no more than we do. At this moment the Baron de Walef was announced. Ah, pardieu, now we shall know, continued Pompadour. Walef is so intimate with the Duchesse, he will be able to tell us. Walef, recognizing them, came toward them. Harmental and Walef had not seen each other since the day of the duel with which this story opened, so that they met with pleasure. Then, after exchanging compliments, "My dear Walef," said Harmental, "can you tell me what is the meaning of this great assembly, when I expected to find only a select committee?" "My foi, I do not know anything of it," said Walef. "I have just come from Madrid." "Everyone has just arrived from somewhere," said Pompadour, laughing. "Ah, here is Milesius. I hope he has been no further than Doms or Châtenay, and as at any rate he has certainly passed through Madame de Maine's room, we shall have some news at last." At these words Pompadour made a sign to Milesius, but the worthy chancellor was so gallant that he must first acquit himself of his duty toward the ladies. After he had bowed to them, he came toward the group, among which were Pompadour, Harmental, and Walef. "Come, my dear Milesius," said Pompadour. "We are waiting for you most impatiently. We have just arrived from the four quarters of the globe. It appears, Walef from the south, Harmental from the west, Laval from the east, I from the north, you from I do not know where, so that we confess that we are very curious to know what we're going to do here at Sceaux. You have come to assist at a great solemnity, at the reception of a new knight of the Order of the Honey Bee." "Peste!" said Harmental, a little piqued that they should not have left him time to go to the Rue du Temps Perdu before coming to Sceaux. "I understand now why Madame de Maine told us to be so exact at a rendezvous. As to myself, I am very grateful to Her Highness." "First of all, you must know, young man," interrupted Milesius, "that there is no Madame de Maine nor Highness in the question. There is only the beautiful fairy Ludovic, the queen of the bees, whom every one must obey blindly. Our queen is all-wise and all-powerful, and when you know who is the knight we are to receive, you will not regret your diligence." "And who is it?" asked Walef, who, arriving from the greatest distance, was naturally the most anxious to know why he had been brought home. "His Excellency the Prince de Celemarre." "Ah," said Pompadour, "I begin to understand." "And I," said Walef. "And I," said Harmental. "Very well," said Milesius, smiling, "and before the end of the evening you will understand still better. Meanwhile, do not try to see further. It is not the first time you have entered with your eyes bandaged, Monsieur de Harmental." At these words, Milesius advanced toward a little man, with a flat face, flowing hair, and a discontented expression. Harmental inquired who it was, and Pompadour replied that it was the poet Lagrange Chancel. The young men looked at the newcomer with curiosity mixed with disgust. Then, turning away, and leaving Pompadour to advance toward the Cardinal de Polignac, who entered at this moment, they went into the embrasure of a window to talk over the occurrences of the evening. The Order of the Honey Bee had been founded by Madame de Maine, apropos of the Italian motto which she had adopted at her marriage. Little insects inflict large stings. This order had, like others, its decorations, its officers, and its Grand Master. The decoration was a medal, representing on one side a hive, and on the other the queen bee. It was hung by a lemon-colored ribbon, and was worn by every knight whenever he came to Sceaux. The officers were Milesius, Saint Aulaire, the Abbé Chaulu, and Saint Genest. Madame de Maine was Grand Master. It was composed of 39 members, and could not exceed this number. The death of Monsieur de Nevers had left a vacancy, which was to be filled by the nomination of the Prince de Celemarre. The fact was that Madame de Maine had thought it safer to cover this political meeting with a frivolous pretext, feeling sure that a fete in the gardens at Sceaux would appear less suspicious in the eyes of Dubois and Messire Voyer d'Argenson than an assembly at the Arsenal. Thus, as will be seen, nothing had been forgotten to give its old splendor to the Order of the Honey Bee. At 4 o'clock precisely, The time fixed with ceremony. The doors of the room opened, and they perceived, in a salon hung with crimson satin, spangled with silver bees, the beautiful fairy Ludovic seated on a throne raised on 3 steps. She made a gesture with her golden wand, and all her court, passing into the salon, arranged themselves in a half-circle round her throne, on the steps at which the dignitaries of the order placed themselves. After the initiation of the Prince de Celemaree as a Knight of the Honey Bee, a second door was opened, displaying a room brilliantly lighted, where a splendid supper was laid. The new Knight of the Order offered his hand to the fairy, and conducted her to the supper-room, followed by the assistants. The entertainment was worthy of the occasion, and the flow of wit which so peculiarly characterized the epoch was well sustained. As the hour began to draw late, the Duchesse de Maine rose and announced that, having received an excellent telescope from the author of the Worlds, she invited her company to study astronomy in the garden. Chapter 22. The Queen of the Greenlanders. As might have been expected, new surprises awaited the guests in the garden. These gardens, designed by Le Nôtre for Colbert and sold by him to the Duc de Maine, had now really the appearance of fairy abode. They were bounded only by a large sheet of water, in the midst of which was a pavilion of Aurora, so called because from this pavilion was generally given the signal that the night was finished, and that it was time to retire, and had, with their games of tennis, football, and tilting at the ring, an aspect truly royal. Every one was astonished on arriving to find all the old trees and graceful paths linked together by garlands of light, which changed the night into brilliant day. At the approach of Madame de Maine, a strange party, consisting of 7 individuals, advanced gravely toward her. They were dressed entirely in fur and wore hairy caps, which hid their faces. They had with them a sledge drawn by 2 reindeer, and their deputation was headed by a chief wearing a long robe lined with fur, with a cap of foxskin, on which were 3 tails. This chief, kneeling before Madame de Maine, addressed her, "Madam, the Greenlanders have chosen me, as one of the chief among them, to offer you, on their parts, the sovereignty of their state." This allusion was so evident and yet so safe that a murmur of approbation ran to the whole assembly, and the ambassador, visibly encouraged by this reception, continued. "Fame has told us, even in the midst of our snows, in our little corner of the world, of the charms, the virtues, and the inclinations of your highness. We know that you abhor the sun." This allusion was as quickly seized on as the first, for the sun was the regent's device, and as we have said, Madame de Maine was well known for her predilection in favor of night. "Consequently, madam," continued the ambassador, "as in our geographical position God has blessed us with 6 months of night and 6 months of twilight, we come to propose to you to take refuge in our land from the sun, which you so much dislike, and in recompense for that which you leave here, we offer you the title of Queen of the Greenlanders. We are certain that your presence will cause our arid plains to flower, and that the wisdom of your laws will conquer our stubborn spirit, and that, thanks to the gentleness of your reign, we shall renounce a liberty less sweet than your rule." "But," said Madame de Maine, "it seems to me that the kingdom you offer me is rather distant, and I confess I do not like long voyages." "We foresaw your reply, madam," replied the ambassador, "and, thanks to the enchantments of a powerful magician, have so arranged that if you would not go to the mountain should come to you. Ola genii," continued the chief, describing some cabalistic circles in the air with his wand, "display the palace of your new sovereign." At this moment some fanciful music was heard. The veil which covered the pavilion of Aurora was raised as if by magic, and the water showed the reflection of a light so skillfully placed that it might have been taken for the moon. By this light was seen an island of ice at the foot of a snowy peak, on which was the palace of the Queen of the Greenlanders, to which led a bridge so light that it seemed to be made of a floating cloud. Then, in the midst of general acclamation, the ambassador took from the hands of one as sweet a crown, which he placed on the Duchess's head, and which she received with as haughty a gesture as though it had been a real crown. Then, getting into the sledge, she went toward the Marine Palace, and, while the guards prevented the crowd from following her into her new domain, she crossed the bridge and entered with the 7 ambassadors. At the same instant the bridge disappeared, as if by an illusion not less visible than the others. The skillful machinist had wished to separate the past from the future, and fireworks expressed the joy of the Greenlanders at seeing their new sovereign. Meanwhile, Madame Domain was introduced by an usher into the most retired part of the palace, and the 7 ambassadors having thrown off caps and cloaks, she found herself surrounded by the Prince de Celemarais, Cardinal Polignac, the Marquis de Pompadour, the Comte de Laval, the Baron de Valef, the Chevalier de Harmental, and Milesieux. As to the usher, who, after having carefully closed all the doors, came and mixed familiarly with all this noble assembly, he was no other than our old friend the Abbé Brigard. Things now began to take their true form, and the fate, as the ambassadors had done, threw off mask and costume, and turned openly to conspiracy. "Gentlemen," said the Duchess, with her habitual vivacity, "we have not an instant to lose, as too long an absence would be suspicious. Let every one tell quickly what he has done, and we shall know what we are about." "Pardon, madam," said the prince, "but you had spoken to me, as being one of ourselves, of a man whom I do not see here, and whom I am distressed not to count among our numbers." "You mean the Duc de Richelieu?" replied Madame Domain. "It is true he promised come. He must have been detained by some adventure. We must do without him." "Yes, certainly," replied the prince. "If he does not come, we must do without him. But I confess that I deeply regret his absence. The regiment which he commands is at Bayonne, and for that reason might be very useful to us. Give orders, I beg, madam, that if he should come, he should be admitted directly." "Abbé," said Madame Domain, turning to Brigard, "you heard. Tell Davranches." The abbé went out to execute this order. "Pardon, monsieur," said Darmental to Milesieux, "but I thought 6 weeks ago that the Duc de Richelieu positively refused to be one of us." "Yes," answered Milesieux, "because he knew that he was intended to take the cordon bleu to the Prince of the Asturias, and he would not quarrel with the regent just when he expected the Golden Fleece as the reward of his embassy. But now the regent has changed his mind and deferred sending the order, so that the Duc de Richelieu, seeing his Golden Fleece put off to the Greek calends, has come back to us." "I have given the order," said the Abbé Brigard, returning. "Well," said the Duchess, "now let us go to business. Laval, you begin." "I, madam," said Laval, "as you know, have been in Switzerland, where, with the King of Spain's name and money, I raise a regiment in the Grisons. This regiment is ready to enter France at any moment, armed and equipped, and only waits the order to march." "Very good, my dear Count," said the Duchess, "and if you do not think it below a Montmorency to be colonel of a regiment while waiting for something better, take the command of this one. It is a surer way of getting the Golden Fleece than taking the Saint Esprit into Spain." "Madam," said Laval, "it is for you to appoint each one his place, and whatever you may appoint will be gratefully accepted by the most humble of your servants." "And you, Pompadour," said Madame Domain, thanking Laval by a gesture of the hand, "what have you done?" "According to your Highness's instructions," replied the Marquis, "I went to Normandy, where I got the protestation signed by the nobility. I bring you 38 good signatures." He drew a paper from his pocket. "Here is the request of the king, and here the signatures." The Duchess snatched the paper so quickly that she almost tore it, and throwing her eyes rapidly over it, "Yes, yes," said she, "you have done well to put them so, without distinction or difference of rank, so that there may be no question of precedence. Guillaume Alexandre de Vieux-Pont, Pierre-Emery de la Pelletrie, de Beaufremont, de La Tour de Pan, de Chatillon. Yes, you are right. These are the best and most faithful names in France. Thanks, Pompadour. You are a worthy messenger. Your skill shall not be forgotten. And you, Chevalier," continued she, turning to Darmental with her irresistible smile. "Aye, madam," said the Chevalier, "according to your orders left for Brittany. And at Nantes I opened my dispatches and took my instructions." "Well," asked the Duchess quickly. "Well, madam," replied Darmental, "I have been as successful as Messrs. de Laval and Pompadour. I have the promises of Messrs. de Montlouis, de Bonamour, de Pontcalet, and de Rohan-Soldu. As soon as Spain shows a squadron inside the coast, Brittany will rise." "You see, Prince," cried the Duchess, addressing Celemarais, with an accent full of ambitious joy, "everything favors us." "Yes," replied the Prince, "but these 4 gentlemen, influential as they are not all that we must have. There are Le Gertsain Tammet, Les Bois Davy, de La Rochefoucauld Gondrel, Les de Court, and Les Deary, whom will be important to gain. It is done, Prince, said Harmental. Here are their letters, and taking several from his pocket, he opened 2 or 3 by chance and read their contents. Well, Prince, cried Madame de Maine, what do you think now? Besides these 3 letters, here is one from Lavoisier, one from Bois Davy, one from Fumy. Stay, Chevalier, here is our right hand. 'Tis that which holds the pen. Let be a pledge to you that, if ever its signature should be royal, it would have nothing to refuse to you. Thanks, madam, said Harmental, kissing her hand respectfully, but you have already given me more than I deserve, and success itself would recompense me so highly, by placing your highness in your proper position, that I should have nothing left to desire. And now, Volif, it is your turn, continued the Duchess. We kept you to the last, for you were the most important. If I understood rightly your signs during dinner, you are not displeased with their Catholic majesties. What would your highness say to a letter written by his highness Philippe himself? Oh, it is more than I ever dared to hope for, cried Madame de Maine. Prince, said Volif, passing a paper to Selmaret, you know his majesty's writing. Assure her royal highness, who does not dare to believe it, that this is from his own hand. It is, said Selmaret. And to whom is it addressed? Asked Madame de Maine, taking it from the prince's hands. To the king, Louis XV. Madam, said the latter. Good, said the Duchess. We will get it presented by the Marshal de Villeroy. Let us see what it says. And she read as rapidly as the writing permitted. The Escurial, March 16th, 1718. Since Providence has placed me on the throne of Spain, I have never for an instant lost sight of the obligations of my birth. Louis XIV, of eternal memory, is always present in my mind. I seem always to hear that great prince, at the moment of our separation, saying to me, the Pyrenees exist no longer. Your Majesty is the only descendant of my elder brother, whose loss I feel daily. God has called you to the succession of this great monarchy, whose glory and interest will be precious to me till my death. I can never forget what I owe to your Majesty, to my country, and to the memory of my ancestor. My dear Spaniards, who love me tenderly, and who are well assured of my love for them, and not jealous of the sentiments which I hold for you, are well assured that our union is the base of public tranquility. I flatter myself that my personal interests are still dear to a nation which has nourished me in its bosom, and that a nobility who has shed so much blood to support them will always look with love on a king who feels an honor to be obliged to them and to have been born among them. This is addressed to you, gentlemen, said the Duchess, interrupting herself, and, looking round her, she continued, impatient to know the rest of the letter. What, then, can your faithful subjects think of a treaty signed against me, or rather against yourself? Since your exhaustive finances can no longer support the current expenses of peace, it is desired that you should unite with my most mortal enemy, and should make war on me. If I do not consent to give up Sicily to the Archduke, I will never subscribe to these conditions. They are insupportable to me. I do not enter into the fatal consequences of this alliance. I only beg your Majesty to convoke the States General directly, to deliberate on an affair of such great consequence. The States General, murmured the Cardinal de Polignac. Well, what does Her Eminence say to the States General? Interrupted Madame de Maine impatiently. Has this measured misfortune not to meet with your approbation? I neither blame nor approve, madam, replied the Cardinal. I only remember that this convocation was made during the League, and that Philip came off badly. Men and times are changed, Cardinal, replied the Duchess. We are not in 1594, but in 1718. Philip II was Flemish, and Philip V is French. The same results cannot take place, since the causes are different. And she went on with the letter. I ask this in the name of the blood which unites us, in the name of the great king from whom we have our origin, in the name of your people and mine. If ever there was a necessity to listen to the voice of the French nation, it is now. It is indispensable to learn what they think, whether they wish to declare war on us. As I am ready to expose my life to maintain its glory and interests, I hope you will reply quickly to propositions I make to you. The Assembly will prevent the unfortunate results which threaten us, and the forces of Spain will only be employed to sustain the greatness of France, and to fight her enemies, as I shall never employ them but to show your Majesty my sincere regard and affection. What do you think of that, gentlemen? Can His Majesty say more? He might have joined to this an epistle addressed directly to the States General, answered the Cardinal de Polignac. This letter, if the king had deigned to send it, would have had a great influence on their deliberations. Here it is, said the Prince de Celamare, taking a paper from his pocket. What, Prince? Cried the Cardinal. I say that His Majesty is of the same opinion as your Eminence, and has sent me this letter, which is a complement of the letter which the Baron de Valef has. Then nothing is wanting, cried Madame de Maine. We want Bayonne, said the Prince de Celamare. Bayonne, the door of France. At this moment Davranches entered, announcing the Duc de Richelieu. And now, Prince, there is nothing wanting, said the Marquis de Pompadour, laughing. For here is he who holds a key. Chapter 23. The Duc de Richelieu. At last, cried the Duchess, seeing Richelieu enter. Are you, then, always the same? Your friends cannot count on you any more than your mistresses. On the contrary, madam, said Richelieu, approaching the Duchess. For today, more than ever, I prove to your Highness that I can reconcile everything. Then you have made a sacrifice for us, Duke, said Madame de Maine, laughing. 10,000 times greater than you can imagine. Who do you think I have left? Madame de Villers? Asked the Duchess. Oh, no, better than that. Madame de Duras? No. Madame de Nesle? Bah. Madame de Polignac? Ah. Pardon, Cardinal. Go on. It does not concern His Eminence. Madame de Soubise, Madame de Gabriant, Madame de Gaze? No. Mademoiselle de Charolais? I have not seen her since my last trip to the Bastille. Mademoiselle de Valois? Oh, I intend her for my wife, when we have succeeded, and I am a Spanish prince. No, madam, I have left, for your Highness, the two most charming grisettes. Grisettes? Ah, fie, cried the Duchess, with movement contempt. I did not think that you descended to such creatures. Creatures? Two charming women, Madame Michelin and Madame Renaud. Do you not know them? Madame Michelin, a beautiful blonde. Her husband is a carpet manufacturer. I recommend him to you, Duchesse. Madame Renaud, an adorable brunette, with blue eyes and black lashes, and whose husband is... My foi, I do not remember exactly. What M. Michelin is probably, said Pompadour, laughing. Pardon, Duke, replied Madame de Maine, who had lost all curiosity for Richelieu's love adventures as soon as they traveled from a certain set. May I venture to remind you that we met here on important business? Oh, yes. We are conspiring, are we not? Had you forgotten it? My foi, a conspiracy is not one of the gayest things in the world. Therefore I forget it whenever I can. But that is nothing. Whenever it is necessary, I can come back to it. Now let us see. How does a conspiracy go on? Here, Duke, look at these letters, and you will know as much as we do. Oh, your Highness must excuse me, said Richelieu. But really I do not read those which are addressed to me, and I have 700 or 800 in the most charming writings, which I am keeping to amuse my old days. Here, Milesiacs, you, who are clearness itself, give me a report. Well, these letters are the engagements of the Breton nobles to sustain the rights of her Highness. Very good. This paper is the protestation of the nobility. Oh, give it me. I protest. But you do not know against what. Never mind. I protest all the same. And, taking the paper, he wrote his name after that of Guillaume Antoine de Chastellux, which was the last signature. Let him alone, said Celamare to the Duchess. Richelieu's name is useful everywhere. And this letter? Asked the Duke, pointing to the missive of Philip V. That letter, continued Milesiacs, is written by King Philip himself. Then His Catholic Majesty writes worse than I do, answered Richelieu. That pleases me. Raff always says it is impossible. If the letter is badly written, the news it contains is none the less good, said Madame de Maine, "for it is a letter begging the King of France to assemble the States General to oppose the Treaty of Quadruple Alliance. And is your Highness sure of the States General? Here is the protestation which engages the nobility. The cardinal answers for the clergy, and there only remains the army." "The army," said Laval, "is my affair. I have the signs manual of 22 colonels." "First," said Richelieu, "I answer for my regiment, which is at Bayonne and which, consequently, is able to be of great service to us." "Yes," said Celamare, "and we reckon on it. But I heard that there was a question of changing the garrison." "Seriously?" "Very seriously. You understand, Duke? We must be beforehand. Instantly. Paper, ink. I will write to the Duc de Berwick. At the moment of commencing a campaign, no one will be astonished at my begging not to be removed from the theater of war." The Duchess hastened to give Richelieu what he asked, and taking a pen, presented it to him herself. The Duke bowed, took the pen, and wrote a letter to the Duc de Berwick, begging that his regiment should not be removed till May. "Now read, madam," continued the Duke, passing the paper to Madame de Maine. The Duchess took the letter, read it, and passed it to her neighbor, who passed it on, so that it made the round of the table. Milesius, who had at the last, could not repress a slight smile. "Ah, poet," said Richelieu, "you are laughing. I suppose I've had the misfortune to offend that ridiculous prude called orthography. You know I am a gentleman, and they forgot to teach me French. Thinking, I suppose, that for 1,500 francs a year I can always have a valet de chambre, who could write my letters and make my verses. This will not prevent me, my dear Milesius, from being in the Academy, not only before you, but before Voltaire. In which case, will your valet de chambre write your discourse? He is working at it, and you will see that it will not be worse than those that some academicians of my acquaintance have done themselves." "Duke," said Madame de Maine, "it will doubtless be a curious thing to see your reception into the illustrious body of which you speak, and I promise you to employ myself tomorrow in procuring a seat for that day, but this evening we are occupied with other things." "Well," said Richelieu, "speak, I listen. What have you resolved?" "To obtain from the king, by means of these 2 letters, the convocation of the States General. Then, sure as we are the 3 orders, we depose the regent and name Philip V in his place. And as Philip V cannot leave Madrid, he gives us full powers, and we govern France in his stead. Well, it is not badly arranged, all that, but to convoke the States General you must have an order from the king. The king will sign it. Without the regent's knowledge? Without the regent's knowledge. Then you have promised the Bishop of Fréjus to make him a cardinal." "No, but I will promise Villeroy a title and the Golden Fleece." "I am afraid, madam," said the Prince of Celamare, "that all this will not determine the marshal to undertake so grave a responsibility. It is not the marshal we want, it is his wife." "Ah, you remind me," said Richelieu. "I undertake it." "You?" said the Duchess with astonishment. "Yes, madam," replied Richelieu. "You have your correspondence, I have mine. I have seen 7 or 8 letters that you have received today. Will your Highness have the goodness to look at one I received yesterday? Is this letter for me only, or may it be read aloud? We are among discreet people, are we not?" said Richelieu, looking round him. "I think so," replied the Duchess. "Besides, the gravity of the situation." The Duchess took the letter and read, "Monsieur le Duc, I am a woman of my word. My husband is on the eve of setting out for the little journey you know of. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, I shall be at home for you only. Do not think that I decide on this step without having put all the blame on the shoulders of Monsieur de Villeroy. I begin to fear for him, as you may have undertaken to punish him. Come, then, at the appointed hour, to prove to me that I am not too much to blame in conspiring with you against my lord and master." "Ah, pardon. This is not the one I intended to show you. That is the one of the day before yesterday. Here is yesterday's." The Duchess took the second letter and read as follows: "My dear Armand, is this it, or are you mistaken again?" said the Duchess to Richelieu. "No, no, this time it is right." The Duchess went on: "My dear Armand, you are a dangerous advocate when you plead against Monsieur de Villeroy. I need to exaggerate your talents to diminish my weakness. You had, in my heart, a judge, interested in your gaining your cause. Come tomorrow to plead again, and I will give you an audience. And have you been there? Certainly, madam. And the Duchess will do, I hope, all we desire. And, as she makes her husband do whatever she likes, we shall have our order for the convocation of the States General on his return. And when will he return? In a week. And can you be faithful all that time? Madam, when I have undertaken a cause, I am capable of the greatest sacrifices to forward it. Then we may count on your word. I pledge myself. You hear, gentlemen, said the Duchesse de Maine. Let us continue to work. You, Laval, act on the army. You, Pompadour, on the nobility. You, Cardinal, on the clergy. And let us leave the Duc de Richelieu to act on Madame de Villeroy. And for what day is our next meeting fixed? Asked Celimare. All depends on circumstances, Prince, replied the Duchess. At any rate, if I have not time to give you notice, I will send the same carriage and coachman to fetch you who took you to the arsenal the first time you came there. Then, turning toward Richelieu, you'd give us the rest of the evening, Duke? I ask your pardon, replied Richelieu, but it is absolutely impossible. I am expected in the Rue de Bones en Fawn. What? Have you made it up with Madame de Sabrin? We never quarrel, madam. Take care, Duke. That looks like constancy. No, madam, it is calculation. Ah, I see that you are on the road toward becoming devoted. I never do things by halves, madam. Well, we will follow your example, Monsieur le Duc. And now we've been an hour and a half away, and should, I think, return to the gardens, that our absence may not be too much noticed. Besides, I think the goddess of night is on the shore, waiting to thank us for the preference we have given her over sun. With your permission, however, madam, said Laval, I must keep you an instant longer to tell you the trouble I am in. Speak, Count, replied the Duchess. What is the matter? It is about our requests and our protestations. It was agreed, if you remember, that they should be printed by workmen who cannot read. Well, I bought a press and established it in the cellar of a house behind the Val de Grace. I enlisted the necessary workmen, and up to the present time, have had the most satisfactory results. But the noise of our machine has given rise to the suspicion that we were coining false money, and yesterday the police made a descent on the house. Fortunately, there was time to stop the work and roll a bed over the trap, so that they discovered nothing. But as a visit might be renewed, and with a less fortunate result, as soon as they were gone, I dismissed the workmen, buried the press, and had all the proofs taken to my own house. And you did well, Count, cried the Cardinal de Polignac. But what are we to do now? Asked Madame de Maine. Have the press taken to my house, said Pompadour. Or mine, said Valef. No, no, said Milesius. A press is too dangerous a means. One of the police may easily slip it among the workmen, and all will be lost. Besides, there cannot be much left to print. The greater part is done, said Laval. Well, continued Milesius, my advice is, as before, to employ some intelligent copyists, whose silence we can buy. Yes, this will be much safer, said Polignac. But where can we find such a man, said the prince. It is not a thing for which we can take the first comber. If I dared, said the Abbé Brigade. Dare, Abbé, dare, said the Duchess. I should say that I know the man you want. Did I not tell you, said Pompadour, that the Abbé was a precious man? But is he really what we want? Said Polignac. Oh, if your eminence had him made on purpose, he could not do better, said Brigade. A true machine who will write everything and see nothing. But as a still greater precaution, said the prince, we might put the most important papers into Spanish. Then, Prince, said Brigade, I will send him to you. No, no, said Celimare. He must not set his foot within the Spanish embassy. It must be done through some third party. Yes, yes, we will arrange all that, said the Duchess. The man is found, that is the principal thing. You answer for him, Brigade? I do, madam. That is all we require. And now there is nothing to keep us any longer, continued the Duchess. Monsieur de Harmental, Give me your arm, I beg." The Chevalier hastened to obey Madame de Maine, who seized this opportunity to express her gratitude for the courage he had shown in the Rue de Bones Enfants and his skill in Brittany. At the door of the pavilion, the Greenland envoys, now dressed simply as guests, found a little galley waiting to take them to the shore. Madame de Maine entered first, seated Darmental by her, leaving Milesius to do the honors to Celamure and Richelieu. As the Duchess had said, the goddess of night, dressed in black gauze spangled with golden stars, was waiting on the other side of the lake, accompanied by the 12 Hours. And as the Duchess approached, they began to sing a cantata appropriate to the subject. At the first notes of the solo, Darmental started, for the voice of the singer had so strong a resemblance to another voice, well known to him and dear to his recollection, that he rose involuntarily to look for the person whose accents had so singularly moved him. Unfortunately, in spite of the torches which the Hours, her subjects, held, he could not distinguish the goddess's features, which were covered with a long veil, similar to her dress. He could only hear that pure, flexible, sonorous voice and that easy and skillful execution, which he had so much admired when he heard it for the first time in the Rue du Temps Perdu, and each accent of that voice, becoming more distinct as he approached the shore, made him tremble from head to foot. At length the solo ceased and the chorus recommenced, but Darmental, insensible to all other thoughts, continued to follow the vanished notes. "Well, Monsieur de Harmental," said the Duchess, "are you so accessible to the charms of music that you forget that you are my cavalier?" "Oh, pardon, madam," said Darmental, leaping to the shore and holding out his hand to the Duchess. "But I thought I recognized that voice, and I confess it brought back such memories." "That proves that you are an habitué of the opera, my dear Chevalier, and that you appreciate, as it deserves, Mademoiselle Barry's talent." "What, is that voice Mademoiselle Barry's?" asked Darmental with astonishment. "It is, monsieur, and if you do not believe me," replied the Duchess, "permit me to take Laval's arm, that you may go and assure yourself of it." "Oh, madam," said Darmental, respectfully retaining the hand she was about to withdraw, "pray excuse me. We are in the gardens of Armida, and a moment of error may be permitted among so many enchantments." And, presenting his arm again to the Duchess, he conducted her toward the chateau. At this instant a feeble cry was heard, and feeble as it was, it reached Darmental's heart, and he turned involuntarily. "What is it?" asked the Duchess, with an uneasiness mixed with impatience. "Nothing, nothing," said Richelieu. "It is little Barry, who has the vapors. Make yourself easy, madam. I know the disease. It is not dangerous. If you particularly wish it, I would even go tomorrow to learn how she is." 2 hours after this little accident, which was not sufficient to disturb the fate in any way, Darmental was brought back to Paris by the Abbé Brigard, and re-entered his little attic in the Rue du Temps Perdu, from which he had been absent 6 weeks. Chapter 24. Jealousy. The first sensation Darmental experienced on returning was one of inexpressible satisfaction at finding himself again in that little room so filled with recollections. Though he had been absent 6 weeks, one might have supposed that he had only quitted it the day before, as, thanks to the almost maternal care of Madame Denis, everything was in its accustomed place. Darmental remained an instant, his candle in his hand, looking around with a look almost of ecstasy. All the other impressions of his life were effaced by those which he had experienced in this little corner of the world. Then he ran to the window, opened it, and threw an indescribable look of love over the darkened windows of his neighbor. Doubtless Bathilde slept the sleep of an angel, unconscious that Darmental was there, trembling with love and hope. He remained thus for more than half an hour, breathing the night air, which had never seemed to him so pure and fresh, and began to feel that Bathilde had become one of the necessities of his life. But as he could not pass the whole night at his window, he then closed it and came into his room, although only to follow up the recollections with which it was filled. He opened his piano and passed his fingers over the keys at the risk of re-exacting the anger of the lodger on the 3rd floor. From the piano, he passed to the unfinished portrait of Bathilde. At length he slept, listening again in his mind to the air sung by Mademoiselle Barry, whom he finished by believing to be one and the same person as Bathilde. When he awoke, Darmental jumped from his bed and ran to the window. The day appeared already advanced, The sun was shining brilliantly, yet Bathilde's window remained hermetically closed. The Chevalier looked at his watch. It was 10 o'clock, and he began to dress. We have already confessed that he was not free from a certain almost feminine coquetry, but this was a fault of time, when everything was mannered, even passion. At this time, it was not a melancholy expression on which he reckoned. The joy of return had given to his face a charming expression of happiness, and it was evident that a glance from Bathilde would crown him king of the creation. This glance he came to the window to seek, but Bathilde's remained closed. Harmental opened his, hoping that the noise would attract her attention. Nothing stirred. He remained there an hour. During this hour, there was not even a breath of wind to stir the curtains. The young girl's room must be abandoned. He coughed, opened and closed a window, detached little pieces of plaster from the wall, and threw them against the window, all in vain. To surprise succeeded uneasiness. This window, so obstinately closed, must indicate absence, if not misfortune. Bathilde absent! Where could she be? What had happened to disturb her calm, regular life? Who could he ask? No one but Madame Denis could know. It was quite natural that Harmental should pay a visit to his landlady on his return, and he accordingly went down. Madame Denis had not seen him since the day of the breakfast. She had not forgotten his attention when she fainted. She received him like the prodigal son. Fortunately for Harmental, the young ladies were occupied with a drawing lesson, and Boniface was at his office, so that he saw no one but his hostess. The conversation fell naturally on the order and neatness of his room during his absence. From this the transition was easy to question if the opposite lodging had changed tenants. Madame Denis replied that she had seen Bathilde at the window the morning before, and that in the evening her son had met Beauvat returning for his office, but had noticed in him a singular air of pride and hauteur. This was all Harmental wished to know. Bathilde was in Paris and at home. Chance had not yet directed her looks toward that window so long closed, and that room so long empty. He took leave of Madame Denis with an effusion of gratitude which he was far from attributing to its true cause, and on the landing he met the Abbé Brigard, who was coming to pay his daily visit to Madame Denis. The abbé asked if he was going home, and promised to pay him a visit. On entering his room, Harmental went straight to the window. Nothing was changed. It was evidently a plan, and he resolved to employ the last means which he had reserved. He sat down to the piano, and after a brilliant prelude sang the air of the Cantata of Night, which he had heard the evening before, and of which he retained every note in his memory. Meanwhile, he did not lose sight for an instant of the inexorable window, but there was no sign. The opposite room had no echo, but Harmental had produced an effect which he did not expect. Hearing applause, he turned round and saw the Abbé Brigard behind him. "Ah, it is you, Abbé," said Harmental. "I did not know that you were so great a lover of music, nor are you so good a musician. Peste, my dear pupil, an air you only heard once. It is wonderful. I thought it very beautiful, Abbé, and as I have a very good memory for sounds, I retained it. And then it was so admirably sung, was it not?" "Yes," said Harmental. "Mademoiselle Barry has an exquisite voice, and the first time she sings I shall go incognito to the opera." "Is it that voice you want to hear?" asked Brigard. "Yes." "Then you must not go to the opera for that." "And where must I go?" "Nowhere. Stay here. You are in the boxes." "What?" "The goddess of night is your neighbor." "Bathilde!" cried Harmental. "Then I was not deceived. I recognize her. But it is impossible. How could she have been there?" "First of all," said the abbé, "nothing is impossible. Remember that before you deny or undertake anything. Believe that everything is possible. It is a way to succeed in everything. But Bathilde—" "Yes. Does it not appear strange at first? Well, nothing is more simple. But it does not interest you, Chevalier. Let's talk of something else." Yes, abbé. You're strangely mistaken. I am deeply interested." "Well, my dear pupil, since you are so curious, this is a whole affair. The Abbé Chaulu knows Mademoiselle Bathilde. Is not that your neighbor's name?" "Yes. How does the Abbé Chaulu know her?" "Oh, it is very simple. The guardian of this charming child is, as you know, or do not know, one of the best writers and copyists in the capital. The Abbé Chaolu wants someone to copy his poetry. Since being blind, he is obliged to dictate in the first instance to a little lackey who cannot spell, and he confided this important task to Buvat. By this means, he has become acquainted with Mademoiselle Bethilde. But all this does not explain how Mademoiselle Bethilde came to Sceaux. Stop. Every history has its commencement, its middle, and its termination. Abbé, you will make me swear. Patience, patience. Go on, I listen to you. Well, having made Mademoiselle Bethilde's acquaintance, the Abbé Chaolu, like the rest, has felt the influence of her charms, for there is a species of magic attached to the young person in question. No one can see her without loving her. I know it, murmured Harmental. Then, as Mademoiselle Bethilde is full of talent, and not only sings like a nightingale, but draws like an angel, Chaolu spoke of her so enthusiastically to Mademoiselle Delaunay that she thought of employing her for the costumes of the different personages in the fête. This does not tell me that it was Bethilde and not Mademoiselle Barry who sang Lost Night. We are coming to it. Well, it happened that Mademoiselle Delaunay, like the rest of the world, took a violent fancy to the little witch. Instead of sending her away after the costumes were finished, she kept her 3 days at Sceaux. She was still there the day before yesterday, closeted with Mademoiselle Delaunay, when someone entered with bewildered air to announce that the director of the opera wished to speak to her on a matter of importance. Mademoiselle Delaunay went out, leaving Bethilde alone. Bethilde, to amuse herself, went to the piano and, finding both the instrument and her voice in good order, began to sing a great scene from some opera, and with such perfection that Mademoiselle Delaunay, returning and hearing this unexpected song, opened the door softly, listened to the air, and threw her arms round the beautiful singer's neck, crying out that she could save her life. Bethilde, astonished, asked how, and in what manner, she could render her so great a service. Then Mademoiselle Delaunay told her how she had engaged Mademoiselle Barry of the opera to sing the cantata night on the succeeding evening, and she had fallen ill and sent to say that to her great regret Her Royal Highness the Duchesse de Maine could not rely upon her, so that there would be no night, and, consequently, no fête, if Bethilde would not have the extreme goodness to undertake the aforesaid cantata. Bethilde, as you may suppose, defended herself with all her might, and declared that it was impossible that she should thus sing music which she did not know. Mademoiselle Delaunay put the cantata before her. Bethilde said that the music seemed terribly difficult. Mademoiselle Delaunay answered that for a musician of her powers, nothing was difficult. Bethilde got up. Mademoiselle Delaunay made her sit down again. Bethilde clasped her hands. Mademoiselle Delaunay unclasped them and placed them on the piano. The piano being touched gave out a sound. Bethilde, in spite of herself, played the first bar, then the second, then the whole cantata. Then she attacked the song and sang it to the end with an admirable justness of intonation and beauty of expression. Mademoiselle Delaunay was enchanted. Madame de Maine arrived in despair at what she had heard of Mademoiselle Barry. Mademoiselle Delaunay begged Bethilde to recommence the cantata. Bethilde did not dare to refuse. She played and sang like an angel. Madame de Maine joined her prayers to those of Mademoiselle Delaunay. You know, Chevalier, that it is impossible to refuse Madame de Maine anything. Poor Bethilde was obliged to give way, and half laughing, half crying, she consented on 2 conditions. The first, that she might go herself to her friend Buvat to explain her absence. The second, that she might remain at home all that evening and the next morning in order to study the unfortunate cantata. These clauses, after a long discussion, were granted, with reciprocal promises, on Bethilde's part that she would return at 7 o'clock the next evening, on the part of Mademoiselle Delaunay and Madame de Maine, that everyone should continue to believe that it was Mademoiselle Barry who sung. But then, asked Harmental, how was the secret betrayed? Oh, by an unforeseen circumstance, replied Brigard, in that strange manner which caused one to doubt if he was in jest or earnest. All went off capitally, as you know, till the end of the cantata, and the proof is that having only heard it once, you are able to remember it from one end to the other. At the moment the galley which brought us in the pavilion of Aurora touched the shore, whether from emotion at having sung for the first time in public, or that she recognized among Madame de Maine's suite someone she had not expected to see there, For some unknown reason, however, the poor goddess of night uttered a cry and fainted in the arms of the hours, her companions. All promises and oaths were at once forgotten. Her veil was removed to throw water in her face, so that when I came up, while you were going away with her highness, I was much astonished to find, instead of Mademoiselle Barry, your pretty neighbor. I questioned Mademoiselle Delaunay, and as it was impossible any longer to keep the incognito, she told me what had passed, under the seal of secrecy, which I betrayed for you only, my dear pupil, because I do not know why I can refuse you nothing. And this indisposition? Asked Harmental with uneasiness. Oh, it was nothing, a mere momentary emotion which had no bad consequences, since, in spite of all they could say to the contrary, Bathilde would not remain another hour at Sceaux, but insisted on returning, so that they put a carriage at her disposal, and she ought to have been home an hour before us. Then you are sure she is at home? Thanks, Abbé. That is all I wish to know. And now, said Brigard, I may go, may I not? You have no more need of me, now that you know all you wish to know. I do not say so, my dear Brigard. On the contrary, stop, you will give me great pleasure. No, I thank you. I have got some business of my own to transact in the town, and will leave you to your reflections, my dear pupil. When shall I see you again? Asked Harmental mechanically. Most likely tomorrow, answered the abbé. Adieu till tomorrow, then. Till tomorrow. So saying, the abbé turned round, laughing his peculiar laugh, and reached the door while Harmental was reopening his window, determined to remain there till the next day, if necessary, and only desiring, as a reward for this long watch, to catch a single glimpse of Bathilde. The poor gentleman was in love over head and ears. Chapter 25. A Pretext. At a few minutes past 4, Harmental saw Beauvat turn the corner of the Rue du Temps-Perdu. The Chevalier thought he could recognize in the worthy rider an air of greater haste than usual, and instead of holding his stick perpendicularly, as a bourgeois always does when he is walking, he held it horizontally, like a runner. As to that air of majesty which had so struck Monsieur Boniface, it had entirely vanished, and had given place to a slight expression of uneasiness. He could not be mistaken. Beauvat would not return so quickly if he was not uneasy about Bathilde. Bathilde, then, was suffering. The Chevalier followed Beauvat with his eyes till the moment when he disappeared in his own door. Harmental, with reason, imagined that Beauvat would go into Bathilde's room, instead of mounting to his own, and he hoped that Beauvat would open the window to admit the last rays of sun, which had been caressing it all day. But Harmental was wrong. Beauvat contented himself with raising the curtain and pressing his good round face against the window, and drumming on the panes with his hands. But even this apparition was of short duration, for he turned round suddenly, as a man does when anyone calls him, and let fall the muslin curtain behind him and disappeared. Harmental presumed that his disappearance was caused by some appeal to his appetite, and this reminded him that in his preoccupation about the obstinacy of that unlucky window in refusing to open, he had forgotten his own breakfast, which, it must be confessed, to the shame of his sensibility, was a very great infraction on his habits. Now, however, as there was no chance that the window would open while his neighbors were at dinner, the Chevalier determined to profit by the interval by dining himself. Consequently, he rang for the porter and ordered him to get from the confectioner the fattest pullet, and from the fruiterer the finest fruit that he could find. As to wine, he had still got some bottles of that which the Abbé Brigard had sent him. Harmental ate with a certain remorse. He could not understand how he could be at the same time so tormented and have such a good appetite. Luckily, he remembered reading in the works of some moralist or other that sorrow sharpened hunger wonderfully. This maxim set his conscience at rest, and the result was that the unfortunate pullet was eaten up to the very bones. Although the act of dining was very natural and by no means reprehensible, Harmental shut the window, leaving, however, a corner of the curtain raised, and, thanks to this precaution, he saw Beauvat, who had doubtless finished his repast, appear at the window of his terrace. As we have said, the weather was splendid, and Beauvat seemed disposed to profit by it. But as he belonged to that class of beings who enjoy nothing alone, he turned round with a gesture which Harmental took to be an invitation to Bathilde, who had doubtless followed him into his room, to come on to the terrace to him. Consequently, he hoped for an instant that Bathilde would appear, and he rose with a beating heart. But he was mistaken. However tempting might be the beautiful evening, and however pressing the invitations of Beuvat, both were useless. But it was not thus with Mirza, who, jumping out of the window without being invited, began to bound joyously about the terrace, holding in her mouth a purple ribbon, which she caused to flutter like a streamer, and which Darmental recognized as the one which had fastened his neighbor's veil on the preceding night. Apparently, Beuvat recognized it also, for he started off in pursuit of Mirza as fast as his little legs would allow him, a pursuit which would doubtless have been indefinitely prolonged if Mirza had not had the imprudence to take refuge in the arbor. Beuvat pursued, and an instant afterward Darmental saw him return with the ribbon in his hand, and after smoothing it on his knee, he folded it up and went in, probably to deposit it in a place of safety. The Chevalier set Mirza to eat sugared, page 353, linked to larger image. This was the moment that the Chevalier had waited for. He opened his window and watched. In a minute he saw Mirza put her head out of the arbor, look about her, and jump onto the terrace. Then Darmental called her in the most caressing and seductive tone possible. Mirza trembled at the sound of his voice, then directed her eyes toward him. At the first look she recognized a man of the bits of sugar, gave a little growl of joy, then with a rapid gastronomic instinct, she darted through Beuvat's window with a single bound and disappeared. Darmental lowered his head, and, almost at the same instant, saw Mirza coming across the street like a flash of lightning. And before he had time to shut his window, she was already scratching at the door. Luckily for Darmental, Mirza had the memory of sugar as strongly developed as he had that of sounds. It will be easily understood that the Chevalier did not make the charming little creature wait, and she darted into the room, bounding, and giving the most unequivocal signs of her joy at his unexpected return. As to Darmental, he was almost as happy as if he had seen Bathilde. Mirza was something to the young girl. She was her dearly loved greyhound, so caressed and kissed by her, who laid his head on her knees during the day, and slept on the foot of her bed during the night. The Chevalier set Mirza to eat sugar, and sat down, and let his heart speak and his pen flow, wrote the following letter. Dearest Bathilde, you believe me very guilty, do you not? But you cannot know the strange circumstances in which I find myself, and which are my excuse. If I could be happy enough to see you for an instant, even for an instant, you would understand that there are in me two different persons, the young student of the attic and the gentleman of the fates at So's. Open your window, then, so that I may see you, or your door, so that I may speak to you. Let me come and sue for your pardon on my knees. I am certain that when you know how unfortunate I am, and how devotedly I love you, you will have pity on me. Adieu once more. I love you more than I can express, more than you can believe, more than you can ever imagine. Raoul. This billet, which would have appeared very cold to a woman of these days, because it only said just what the writer intended, seemed sufficient to Chevalier, and was really impassioned for the epic. Thus Darmental folded it up and attached it, as he had the first, to Mirza's collar. Then, taking up the sugar, which the greedy little animal followed with her eyes to the cupboard, where Darmental shut it up, the Chevalier opened the door of his room, and showed Mirza, with a gesture, what there remained for her to do. Whether it was pride or intelligence, the little creature did not wait to be told twice, darted out on the staircase as if she had wings, and only stopped on the way to bite Monsieur Boniface, whom she met coming home from his office, crossed the road, and disappeared in Bathilde's house. Darmental remained at the window for a minute, fearing that Mirza would take his note to Beuvat instead of Bathilde, but she was too intelligent for that, and he soon saw her appear in Bathilde's room. Consequently, in order not to frighten poor Bathilde too much, he shut his window, hoping that by this concession he should obtain some sign, which would indicate to him that he was pardoned. But it did not turn out so. Darmental waited in vain all the evening and a great part of the night. At 11 o'clock, the light scarcely seen through the double curtains, still hermetically closed, went out altogether, and Darmental was obliged to renounce the hope of seeing Bathilde till the next day. The next day brought the same rigor. It was a settled plan of defense which, with a man less in love than Darmental, would simply have indicated fear of defeat. But the Chevalier, with a simplicity worthy of the age of gold, saw nothing but a coldness, in the eternity of which he began to believe, and it is true that it had lasted 24 hours. Darmental passed the morning in turning in his mind 1,000 projects, each more absurd than preceding one. The only one which had common sense was to cross the street, mount boldly to Bathilde's room, and tell her everything. It came to his mind like all the rest, and as it was the only reasonable one, Darmental did well to stop at it. However, it would be a great boldness to present himself thus before Bathilde, without being authorized by the least sign, and without having any pretext to give. Such a course of conduct could but wound Bathilde, who was only too much irritated already. It was better to wait then, and Darmental waited. At 2 o'clock, Brigod returned, and found Darmental in a very savage state of mind. The abbé threw a glance toward the window, still hermetically closed, and divined everything. He took a chair and sat down opposite Darmental, twisting his thumbs round one another as he saw the Chevalier doing. "My dear pupil," said he, after an instant's silence, "either I am a bad physiognomist, or I read on your face that something profoundly sad has happened to you." "And you read right, my dear abbé," said the Chevalier. "I am ennuyed." "Ah, indeed." "So much so," said Darmental, "that I am ready to send your conspiracy to the devil." "Oh, Chevalier, one must not throw the helve after the hatchet." "What? Send the conspiracy to the devil, when it is going on wheels? Nonsense. And what will the others say?" "Oh, you are charming, you and your others." "The others, my dear abbé, have society, balls, the opera, duels, mistresses, amusements, in fact, and they are not shut up like me in a nasty garret." "Yes, but the piano, the drawing? Even with this, it is not amusing." "Ah, it is not amusing when one sings or draws alone, but when one sings or draws in company, it begins to do better. And with whom, in the devil's name, should I sing or draw? In the first place, there are the demoiselles Denis." "Oh, yes, they sing beautifully and draw well, do they not?" "Mon Dieu! I do not propose them to you as virtuosos and artists. They have not the talents of your neighbor. But, by the by, there is your neighbor." "Well, my neighbor? Why do you not sing with her, since she sings so well? That will amuse you. Do I know her? Does she even open her window? Look, since yesterday she has barricaded herself in her own room." "Ah, yes, my neighbor is amiable." "Yes, they told me that she was charming. Besides, it seems to me that both singing in our own rooms, we should have a singular duet. Then go to her room." "To her room. Have I been introduced to her? Do I know her? Well, make a pretext. I have been searching for one since yesterday." "And you have not found one, a man of imagination like you? My dear pupil, I do not recognize you there." "Listen, abbé, a truce to your pleasantries. I am not in the humor for them today. Everyone has his stupid days." "Well, on those days one addresses oneself to one's friends." "To one's friends, and what for?" "To find the pretext which one has sought for vainly oneself." "Well, then, abbé, you are my friend. Find the pretext. I wait for it." "Nothing is easier." "Really? Do you want it? Take care what you engage to do." "I engage to open your neighbor's door to you." "In a proper manner?" "How? Do I know any others?" "Abbé, I will strangle you if your pretext is bad." "But it is good." "Then you are an adorable man. You remember what the Comte de Laval said about the descent which the police have made upon the house in the Val de Grace, and the necessity he was under of sending away his workmen and burying his press?" "Perfectly." "You remember the determination which was come to in consequence, to employ a copyist. Finally, you remember that I undertook to find that copyist?" "I do." "Well, this copyist on whom I cast my eyes, this honest man whom I promised to discover, is discovered, and is no other than the guardian of Bathilde." "Buvat." "Himself." "Well, I give you full powers. You go to his house. You offer him gold. The door is open to you on the instant, and you can sing as much as you like with Bathilde." "My dear abbé," cried Darmental, "you have saved my life." Darmental took his hat and darted toward the door. Now that he had a pretext, he doubted of nothing. "Stop, stop," said Brigod. "You did not even ask me where the good man must go for the papers in question." "To your house, pardieu." Certainly not. Young man, certainly not. Where then? At the Prince de Lisnay's Rue du Bac, 110. The Prince de Lisnay. And who is he? One of our own making, Davranches, the valet de chamber to Madame de Maine. And you think that he will play his part well? Not for you, perhaps, who are accustomed to see princes, but for Buvat. You are right. Au revoir, Abbé. You find the pretext good? Capital. Go, then, and good luck go with you. Harmental descended the stairs for a time. Then, having arrived at the middle of the street, and seeing the abbé watching him from the window, he made a parting sign to him with his hand, and disappeared through the door of Bathilde's house. Chapter 26. Counterplots. On her part, as may be easily understood, Bathilde had not made such an effort without suffering from it. The poor child loved Harmental with all the strength of a love at 17, of first love. During the first month of his absence, she had counted the days. During the 5th week, she had counted the hours. During the last week, she had counted the minutes. Then it was that the Abbé Chaulu fetched her, to take her to Mademoiselle de Launay, and as he had taken care, not only to speak of her talents, but also to tell who she was, Bathilde was received with all the consideration which was due to her, and which poor de Launay paid all the more readily from it having been so long forgotten toward herself. This removal, which had rendered Buvat so proud, was received by Bathilde as an amusement, which might help her to pass these last moments of suspense. But when she found that Mademoiselle de Launay wished to retain her longer, when, according to her calculation, Raoul would return, she cursed the instant when the abbé had taken her to Sceaux, and would certainly have refused if Madame de Maine herself had not interposed. It was impossible to refuse a person who, according to the ideas of the time, from the supremacy of her rank, had almost a right to command the service. But as she would have reproached herself eternally if Raoul had returned in her absence, and in returning had found her window closed, she had, as we have seen, insisted on returning to study the cantata and to explain to Buvat what had passed. Poor Bathilde! She had invented 2 false pretexts to hide, under a double veil, the true motive of her return. If Buvat had been proud when Bathilde was employed to draw the costumes for the fete, he was doubly so when he found that she was destined to play a part in it. Buvat had constantly dreamed of Bathilde's return to fortune, and to that social position of which her parents' death had deprived her, and all that brought her among the world in which she was born appeared to him a step toward this inevitable and happy result. However, the 3 days which he had passed without seeing her appeared to him like 3 centuries. At the office it was not so bad, though everyone could see that some extraordinary event had happened. But it was when he came home that poor Buvat found himself so miserable. The first day he could not eat, when he sat down to that table where, for 13 years, he had been accustomed to see Bathilde sitting opposite to him. The next day, when Nanette reproached him and told him that he was injuring his health, he made an effort to eat, but he had hardly finished his meal when he felt as if he had been swallowing lead, and was obliged to have recourse to the most powerful digestives to help down this unfortunate dinner. The 3rd day Buvat did not sit down at table at all, and Nanette had the greatest trouble to persuade him to take some broth, into which she declared she saw 2 great tears fall. In the evening Bathilde returned, and brought back his sleep and his appetite. Buvat, who for 3 nights had hardly slept, and for 3 days had hardly eaten, now slept like a top and ate like an ogre. Bathilde also was very joyous. She calculated that this must be the last day of Raoul's absence. He had said he should be away 6 weeks. She had already counted 41 long days, and Bathilde would not admit that there could be an instant's delay. Thus the next day she watched her neighbor's window constantly while studying the cantata. Carriages were rare in the Rue du Temps Perdu, but it happened that 3 passed between 10 and 4. Each time she ran breathless to the window, and each time was disappointed. At 4 o'clock Buvat returned, and this time was Bathilde, who could not swallow a single morsel. The time to set out for Sceaux at length arrived, and Bathilde set out deploring the fate which prevented her following her watch through the night. When she arrived at Sceaux, however, the lights, the noise, the music, and above all the excitement of singing for the first time in public, made her, for the time, almost forget Raoul. Now and then the idea crossed her mind that he might return during her absence, and finding her window closed, would think her indifferent. But then she remembered that Mademoiselle de Launay had promised her that she should be home before daylight, and she determined that Raoul should see her standing at her window Directly he opened his. Then she would explain to him how she had been obliged to be absent that evening. She would allow him to suspect what she had suffered, and he would be so happy that he would forgive her. All this passed through Bathilde's mind while waiting for Madame Domain on the border of the lake, and it was in the midst of the discourse she was preparing for a roll that the approach of the little galley surprised her. At first, in her fear of singing before such a great company, she thought her voice would fail, but she was too good an artiste not to be encouraged by the admirable instrumentation which supported her. She resolved not to allow herself to be intimidated, and abandoning herself to the inspiration of the music and the scene, she went through her part with such perfection that everyone continued to take her for the singer whom she replaced, although that singer was the first of the opera and was supposed to have no rival. But Bathilde's astonishment was great when, after the solo was finished, she looked toward the group which was approaching her and saw, seated by Madame Domain, a young cavalier, so much like Raoul that, if this apparition had presented itself to her in the midst of the song, her voice must have failed her. For an instant she doubted, but as the galley touched the shore she could do so no longer. Two such likenesses could not exist, even between brothers, and it was certain that the young Cavalier of Sceaux and the young student of the attic were one and the same person. This was not, however, what wounded Bathilde. The rank which Raoul appeared to hold, instead of removing him from the daughter of Albert du Rocher, only brought him nearer to her, and she had recognized in him, at first sight, as he had in her, the marks of high birth. What wounded her, as a betrayal of her good faith and an insult to her love, was his pretended absence, during which Raoul, forgetting the Rue du Temps Perdu, had left his little room solitary to mix in the fates at Sceaux. Thus Raoul had had but an instant's caprice for her, sufficient to induce him to pass a week or two in an attic, but he had soon got tired of this life. Then he had invented the pretext of a journey, declaring that it was misfortune. But none of this was true. Raoul had never quitted Paris. Or, if he had, his first visit had not been to the Rue du Temps Perdu. When Raoul touched the shore and she found herself only 4 steps from him and saw him whom she had supposed to be a young provincial offering his arm, in that elegant and easy manner, to the proud Madame Domain herself, her strength abandoned her, and with that cry which had gone to Darmentales's heart, she fainted. On opening her eyes, she found near her Mademoiselle de Launay, who lavished on her every possible attention. She wished that instead of returning to Paris, Bathilde should remain at Sceaux, but she was in haste to leave this place where she had suffered so much, and begged, with an accent that could not be refused, to be allowed to return, and as a carriage was in readiness to take her, she went directly. On arriving, Bathilde found Nanette waiting for her. Beauvat also had wished to do so, but by 12 o'clock he was so sleepy that it was in vain he rubbed his eyes and tried to sing his favorite song. He could not keep awake, and at length he went to bed, telling Nanette to let him know the next morning, as soon as Bathilde was visible. Bathilde was delighted to find Nanette alone. Beauvat's presence would have been very irksome to her, but as soon as she found that there was no one but Nanette, Bathilde burst into tears. Nanette had expected to see her young mistress return proud and joyous at the triumph which she could not fail to obtain, and was distressed to see her in this state. But to all her questions Bathilde replied that it was nothing, absolutely nothing. Nanette saw that it was no use to insist, and went to her room, which was next to Bathilde's, but could not resist the impulse of curiosity, and looking to the keyhole, she saw her young mistress kneel down before her little crucifix, and then, as by a sudden impulse, run to the window, open it, and look opposite. Nanette doubted no longer. Bathilde's grief was somehow connected with her love, and it was caused by the young man who lived opposite. Nanette was more easy. Women pity these griefs, but they also know that they may come to a good end. Nanette went to sleep much more easy than if she had not been able to find out the cause of Bathilde's tears. Bathilde slept badly. The first griefs and the first joys of love have the same results. She woke, therefore, with sunken eyes and pale cheeks. Bathilde would have dispensed with seeing Beauvat, but he had already asked for her twice. So she took courage and went smiling to speak to him. Beauvat, however, was not deceived. He could not fail to notice her pale cheeks, and Bathilde's grief was revealed to him. She denied that there was anything the matter. Beauvat pretended to believe her, but went to the office very uneasy and anxious to know what could have happened to her. When he was gone, Nanette approached Bathilde, who was sitting in her chair with her head leaning on her hand, and stood an instant before her, contemplating her with an almost maternal love. Then, Finding that Bathilde did not speak, she herself broke silence. "Are you suffering still, mademoiselle?" said she. "Yes, my good Nanette. If you would open the window, I think it would do you good." "Oh, no, Nanette, thank you. The window must remain closed." "You do not know, perhaps, mademoiselle?" "Yes, yes, Nanette, I know. That the young man opposite returned this morning." "Well, Nanette," said Bathilde, raising her head and looking at her with severity, "what is that to me?" "Pardon, mademoiselle," said Nanette, "but I thought—" "What did you think?" "That you regretted his absence and would be glad of his return." "You were wrong." "Pardon, mademoiselle, but he appears so distinguished." "Too much so, Nanette. A great deal too much so for poor Bathilde." "Too distinguished for you, mademoiselle," cried Nanette, "as if you were not worth all the noblemen in the world. Besides, you are noble. I know what I appear to be, Nanette, that is to say, a poor girl, with whose peace, honor, and love every nobleman thinks he may play with impunity. You see, Nanette, that this window must be closed. I must not see this young man again. Mon Dieu, Mademoiselle Bathilde, you wish then to kill this poor young man with grief? This whole morning he has not moved from his window, and looks so sad that it is enough to break one's heart. What does his looking sad matter to me? What has he to do with me? I do not know him. I do not even know his name. He is a stranger who has come here to stay for a few days, and who tomorrow may go away again. If I had thought anything of him, I should have been wrong, Nanette. And instead of encouraging me in a love which would be folly, you ought, on the contrary, supposing that it existed, to show me the absurdity and the danger of it. Mon Dieu, mademoiselle, why so? You must love some day, and you may as well love a handsome young man who looks like a king, and who must be rich, since he does not do anything. Well, Nanette, what would you say if this young man who appears to you so simple, so loyal, and so good, were nothing but a wicked traitor, a liar? Ah, mon Dieu, mademoiselle, I should say it was impossible. If I told you that this young man who lives in an attic and who shows himself at the window dressed so simply was yesterday at Sceaux, give his arm to Madame de Maine, dressed as a colonel, I should say, mademoiselle, that at last God is just in sending you someone worthy of you. Holy Virgin, a colonel, a friend of the Duchesse de Maine. Oh, mademoiselle Bathilde, you will be a countess, I tell you, and it is not too much for you. If Providence gave everyone what they deserve, you would be a duchess, a princess, a queen, yes, Queen of France. Madame de Maintenon was... I would not be like her, Nanette. I do not say like her. Besides, it is not the king you love, mademoiselle. I do not love anyone, Nanette. I am too polite to contradict you. But never mind, you are ill, and the first remedy for a young person who is ill is air and sun. Look at the poor flowers. When they are shut up, they turn pale. Let me open the window, mademoiselle. Nanette, I forbid you. Go to your work and leave me. Very well, mademoiselle, I will go, since you drive me away, said Nanette, lifting the corner of her apron to her eye. But if I were in that young man's place, I know very well what I would do. And what would you do? I would come and explain myself, and I am sure that even if he were wrong, you excuse him. Nanette, said Bathilde, if he comes, I forbid you to admit him, do you hear? Very well, mademoiselle, he shall not be admitted, though it is not very polite to turn people away from the door. Polite or not, you will do as I tell you, said Bathilde, to whom contradiction gave strength. And now go. I wish to be alone. Nanette went out. When she was alone, Bathilde burst into tears, for her strength was but pride. She believed herself the most unfortunate woman in the world, as Darmental thought himself the most unfortunate man. At 4 o'clock, Buvat returned. Bathilde, seeing the traces of uneasiness on his good-natured face, tried all she could to tranquilize him. She smiled, she joked, she kept him company at table. But all was in vain. After dinner, he proposed to Bathilde, as an amusement which nothing could resist, to take a walk on the terrace. Bathilde, thinking that if she refused, Buvat would remain with her, accepted, and went up with him into his room. But when there, she remembered that she must write a letter of thanks to the Abbé Chaulu for his kindness in presenting her to Madame de Maine, and, leaving her guardian with Mirza, she went down. Shortly after, she heard Mirza scratching at the door and went to open it. Mirza entered with such demonstrations of joy that Bathilde understood that something extraordinary must have happened, but on looking attentively she saw the letter tied to her collar. As this was the second she had brought, Bathilde had no difficulty in guessing the writer. The temptation was too strong to be resisted, so she detached the paper with one hand, which trembled as she remembered that it probably contained the destiny of her life, while with the other she caressed Mirza, who, standing on her hind legs, appeared delighted to become so important a personage. Bathilde opened the letter and looked at it twice without being able to decipher a single line. There was a mist before her eyes. The letter, while it said a great deal, did not say quite enough. It protested innocence and asked for pardon. It spoke of strange circumstances requiring secrecy, but above all, it said that the writer was madly in love. The result was that, without completely reassuring her, it yet did her good. Bathilde, however, with a remnant of pride, determined not to relent till the next day. Since Raoul confessed himself guilty, he should be punished. Bathilde did not remember that half of this punishment recoiled upon herself. The effect of the letter, incomplete as it was such that when Beauvat returned from the terrace, he thought Bathilde looked infinitely better, and began to believe what she herself had told him in the morning, that her agitation was only caused by the emotion of the day before. Beauvat went to his own room at 8 o'clock, leaving Bathilde free to retire at any hour she liked, but she had not the least inclination to sleep. For a long time she watched, contented and happy, for she knew that her neighbor's window was open, and by this she guessed his anxiety. Bathilde at length dreamed that Raoul was at her feet, and that he gave her such good reasons that it was she, in her turn, who asked for pardon. Thus in the morning she awoke convinced that she had been dreadfully severe, and wondering how she could have had the courage to do so. It followed that her first movement was to run to the window and open it, but perceiving, through an almost imperceptible opening, the young man at his window, she stopped short. Would not this be too complete an avowal? It would be better to wait for Nanette. She would open the window naturally, and in this way her neighbor would not be so able to pride himself on his conquest. Nanette arrived, but she had been too much scolded the day before about this window to risk a second representation of the same scene. She took the greatest pains to avoid even touching the curtains. Bathilde was ready to cry. Beauvat came down as usual to take his coffee with Bathilde, and she hoped that he at least would ask why she kept herself so shut up and give her an opportunity to open the window. Beauvat, however, had received a new order for the classification of some manuscripts, and was so preoccupied that he finished his coffee and left the room without once remarking that the curtains were closed. For the first time Bathilde felt almost angry with him, and thought he must have paid her very little attention not to discover that she must be half stifled in such a close room. What was she to do? Tell Nanette to open the window? She would not do it. Open it herself she could not. She must then wait, but till when? Till the next day, or the day after perhaps. And what would Raoul think? Would he not become impatient at this exaggerated severity? Suppose he should again leave for a fortnight, for a month, for 6 weeks, forever. Bathilde would die. She could not live without Raoul. 2 hours passed thus. Bathilde tried everything, her embroidery, her harpsichord, her drawing, but she could do nothing. Nanette came in. A slight hope returned to her, but it was only to ask leave to go out. Bathilde signed to her that she could go. Nanette was going to Faubourg Saint-Antoine. She would be away 2 hours. What was she to do during these 2 hours? It would have been so delightful to pass them at the window. Bathilde sat down and drew out the letter. She knew it by heart, but yet she read it again. It was so tender, so passionate, so evidently from the heart. Oh, if she could receive a second letter. This was an idea. She looked at Mirza, the graceful little messenger. She took her in her arms, and then, trembling as if she were about to commit a crime, she went to open the outer door. A young man was standing before this door, reaching out his hand toward the bell. Bathilde uttered a cry of joy, and the young man a cry of love. It was Raoul. Chapter 27. The Seventh Heaven. Bathilde made some steps backward, for she had nearly fallen into Raoul's arms. Raoul, having shut the door, followed Bathilde into the room. Their 2 names, exchanged in a double cry. escaped their lips. Their hands met in an electric clasp, and all was forgotten. These two, who had so much to say to each other, yet remained for a long time silent. At length Bathilde exclaimed, "Oh, Raoul, how I have suffered!" "And I," said Darmental, "who have appeared to you guilty, and am yet innocent." "Innocent!" cried Bathilde, to whom, by a natural reaction, all her doubts returned. "Yes, innocent," replied the Chevalier. And then he told Bathilde all of his life that he dared to tell her, his duel with Lafer, how he had, after that, hidden in the Rue du Temps Perdu, how he had seen Bathilde and loved her, his astonishment at discovering successively in her the elegant woman, the skillful painter, the accomplished musician, his joy when he began to think that she was not indifferent to him. Then he told her how he had received, as Colonel of Carabineers, the order to go to Brittany, and on his return was obliged to render an account of his mission to the Duchesse de Maine before returning to Paris. He had gone directly to Sceaux, expecting only to leave his dispatches in passing, when he had found himself in the midst of the fate in which he had been, obliged unwillingly to take a part. This recital was finished by expressions of regret and such protestations of fidelity and love that Bathilde almost forgot the beginning of his discourse in listening to the end. It was now her turn. She also had a long history to tell Darmental. It was the history of her life. With a certain pride in proving to her lover that she was worthy of him, she showed herself as a child with her father and mother, then an orphan and abandoned. Then appeared Beauvat with his plain face and his sublime heart, and she told all his kindness, all his love to his pupil. She passed in review her careless childhood and her pensive youth. Then she arrived at the time when she first saw Darmental, and here she stopped and smiled, for she felt that he had nothing more to learn. Yet Darmental insisted on hearing it all from her own lips, and would not spare her a single detail. 2 hours passed us like 2 seconds, and they were still there when someone rang at the door. Bathilde looked at the clock, which was in the corner of the room. It was 6 minutes past 4. There was no mistake. It was Beauvat. Bathilde's first movement was one of fear, but Raoul reassured her, smiling, for he had the pretext for which the Abbé Brigard had furnished him. The two lovers exchanged a last grasp of the hand. Then Bathilde went to open the door to her guardian, who, as usual, kissed her on the forehead, then, on entering the room, perceived Darmental. Beauvat was astonished. He had never before found any man with his pupil. Beauvat fixed on him his astonished eyes and waited. He fancied he had seen the young man before. Darmental advanced toward him with that ease of which people of a certain class have not even an idea. "It is to Monsieur Beauvat," he said, "that I have the honor of speaking." "To myself, sir," said Beauvat, starting at the sound of a voice which he thought he recognized. "But the honor is on my side." "You know the Abbé Brigard?" continued Darmental. "Yes, perfectly, monsieur, of Madame Denis, is he not?" "Yes," replied Darmental, smiling. "The confessor to Madame Denis. Yes, I know him. A clever man. Did you not once apply to him to get some copies to make?" "Yes, monsieur, for I am a copyist at your service." "Well," said Darmental, "this dear Abbé Brigard, who is my guardian, that you may know who you are speaking to, has found an excellent customer for you." "Ah, truly. Pray take a seat, monsieur." "Thank you. And who is the customer?" "The Prince de Lisney, Rue du Bac, 110. "A prince, monsieur, a prince." "Yes, a Spaniard, who is in correspondence with the Madrid Mercury, and sends all the news from Paris." "Oh, that is a great honor. It will give you some trouble, however, for all the dispatches are in Spanish." "Diable," said Beauvat. "Do you know Spanish?" asked Darmental. "No, monsieur, I do not think so, at least." "Never mind," continued the Chevalier, smiling. "One need not know a language to copy it. I could copy Chinese, monsieur. Calligraphy, like drawing, is an imitative art. And I know that in this respect, Monsieur Beauvat," replied Darmental, "you are a great artist." "Monsieur," said Beauvat, "you embarrass me. May I ask, without indiscretion, at what time I shall find His Highness?" "What Highness?" "His Highness the Prince. I do not remember the name you said," replied Beauvat. "Ah, the Prince de Lisney." Himself. He is not Highness, my dear Monsieur Buvat. Oh, I thought all princes. This is only a prince of the third order, and he will be quite satisfied if you call him Monseigneur. You think so? I am sure of it. And when shall I find him? After your dinner, from 5 to 5:30. You remember the address? Yes, Rue du Bac, 110. I will be there, monsieur. Now, said Harmental, au revoir. And you, mademoiselle, said he, turning to Bathilde, receive my thanks for your kindness in keeping me company while I waited for Buvat, a kindness for which I shall be eternally grateful. And Harmental took his leave, while Bathilde remained astonished at his ease and assurance in such a situation. This young man is really very amiable, said Buvat. Yes, very, said Bathilde mechanically. But it is an extraordinary thing. I think I have seen him before. It is possible, said Bathilde. And his voice, I am sure I know his voice. Bathilde started, for she remembered the evening when Buvat had returned frightened from the adventure in the Rue de Bones on Fawn, and Harmental had not spoken of that adventure. At this moment, Nanette entered, announcing dinner. Buvat instantly went into the other room. Well, mademoiselle, said Nanette softly, the handsome young man came, then after all? Yes, Nanette, yes, answered Bathilde, raised her eyes to heaven with an expression of infinite gratitude, and I am very happy. She passed into the dining room, where Buvat, who had put down his hat and stick on a chair, was waiting for her, and slapping his thighs with his hands, as was his custom in his moments of extreme satisfaction. As to Harmental, he was no less happy than Bathilde. He was loved. He was sure of it. Bathilde had told him so, with the same pleasure she had felt on hearing him make the same declaration. He was loved, not by a poor orphan, not by a little grisette, but by a young girl of rank, whose father and mother had occupied an honorable position at court. There were, then, no obstacles to their union. There was no social interval between them. It is true that Harmental forgot the conspiracy, which might at any time open an abyss under his feet and engulf him. Bathilde had no doubts for the future, and when Buvat, after dinner, took his hat and cane to go to the Prince de Lisnay's, she first fell on her knees to thank God, and then, without hesitation, went to open the windows so long closed. Harmental was still at his. They had very soon settled their plans, and taken Nanette into their confidence. Every day, when Buvat was gone, Harmental was to come and stay 2 hours with Bathilde. The rest of the time would be passed at the windows. Or, if by chance these must be closed, they could write to each other. Toward 7 o'clock, they saw Buvat turning the corner of the Rue Montmartre. He carried a roll of paper in one hand and his cane in the other, and by his important air, it was easy to see that he had spoken to the prince himself. Harmental closed his window. Bathilde had seen Buvat set out with some uneasiness, for she feared that the story of the Prince de Lisnay was only an invention to explain Harmental's presence. The joyous expression of Buvat's face, however, quite reassured her. Well, said she, well, I have seen His Highness. But you know, answered Bathilde, that M. Raoul said the Prince de Lisnay had no right to that title, and was only a prince of the third order. I guarantee him of the first, said Buvat, Sabre de Bois, a man of 5'10", who throws his money about, and pays for copies at 15 francs the page, and has given 25 louis in advance. Then another fear began to come into Bathilde's mind, that this pretended customer, whom Raoul had found for Buvat, was only a pretext to induce him to accept money. This fear had in it something humiliating. Bathilde turned her eyes toward Harmental's window, but she saw Harmental looking at her with so much love through the glass that she thought of nothing but looking at him in return, which she did for so long, that Buvat came forward to see what was attracting her attention, but Harmental, seeing him, let fall the curtain. Well then, said Bathilde, wishing to turn off his attention, you are content? Quite, but I must tell you one thing. What is it? You remember that I told you that I thought I recognized the face and voice of this young man, but could not tell you where I had seen or heard them? Yes, you told me so. Well, it suddenly struck me today, as I was crossing the Rue de Bones on Fawn, that it was the same young man whom I saw on that terrible night, of which I cannot think without trembling. What folly, said Bathilde, trembling, however, herself. I was on the point of returning, however, for I thought this prince might be some brigand chief, and that they were going to entice me into a cavern. But as I never carry any money, I thought that my fears were exaggerated, and so I went on. "And now you are convinced, I suppose," replied Bathilde, "that this poor young man who came from the Abbe Brigade has no connection with him of the Rue de Bones Enfants. Certainly, a captain of thieves could have no connection with his highness. And now," continued Bivat, "you must excuse me if I do not stay with you this evening. I promised his highness to begin the copies directly, and I must do so." Bivat went into his room, leaving Bathilde free to resume the interrupted conversation. Heaven only knows at what hour the windows were closed. Chapter 28. Fenelon's successor. The events which were to rouse our lovers from their happy idleness were preparing in silence. The Duc de Richelieu had kept his promise. The Marshal Villeroy, who had intended to remain a week away from the Tuileries, was recalled on the fourth day by a letter from his wife, who wrote to him that his presence was more than ever necessary near the king, the measles having declared itself at Paris, and having already attacked several persons in the Palais Royal. Monsieur de Villers came back directly, for it will be remembered all those successive deaths which 3 or 4 years before had afflicted the kingdom had been attributed to the measles, and the marshal would not lose this opportunity of parading his vigilance. It was his privilege, as governor of the king, never to leave him except by an order from himself, and to remain with him whoever entered, even though it was the regent himself. It was especially with regard to the regent that the marshal affected such extraordinary precaution, and as this suited the hatred of Madame de Maine and her party, they praised Monsieur de Villeroy highly, and spread abroad a report that he had found on the chimney-piece of Louis XV some poisoned bonbons which had been placed there. The result of all this was an increase of calumny against the Duc d'Orleans, and of importance on the part of the marshal, who persuaded the young king that he owed him his life. By this means he acquired great influence over the king, who, indeed, had confidence in no one but M. de Villeroy and M. de Fréjus. M. de Villeroy was then the man they wanted for the message, and it was agreed that the following Monday, a day when the regent rarely saw the king, the 2 letters of Philip V should be given to him, and M. de Villeroy should profit by his solitude with the king to make him sign the convocation of the States General, and that it should be made public the next day before the hour of the regent's visit, so that there should be no means of drawing back. While all these things were plotting against him, the regent was leading his ordinary life in the midst of his work, his studies, and his pleasures, and above all, of his family bickerings. As we have said, 3 of his daughters gave him serious trouble. Madame de Berry, whom he loved the best, because it saved her when the most celebrated doctors had given her up, throwing off all restraint, lived publicly with Riam, whom she threatened to marry at every observation her father made. A strange threat, but which, if carried out, would at that time have caused far more scandal than the amours, which at any other time such a marriage would have sanctified. Mademoiselle de Chartres persisted in her resolution of becoming a nun, although she still, under her novitiate, continued to enjoy all the pleasures she could manage to introduce into the cloister. She had got in her cell her guns and pistols and magnificent assortment of fireworks, with which she amused her young friends every evening, but she would not leave the convent, where her father went every Wednesday to visit her. The third person of the family who gave him uneasiness was Mademoiselle de Valois, whom he suspected of being Richelieu's mistress, but without ever being able to obtain certain proof, although he put his police on the watch, and had himself more than once paid her visits at hours when he thought it most probable he should meet him. These suspicions were also increased by her refusal to marry the Prince de Dame, an excellent match, enriched as he was by the spoils of La Grande Mademoiselle. The regent had seized a new opportunity of assuring himself whether this refusal were caused by her antipathy to the young prince, or her love for the duke, by welcoming the overtures which Plenieff, his ambassador at Turin, had made for a marriage between the beautiful Charlotte Agli and the Prince de Piedmont. Mademoiselle de Valois rebelled again, but this time in vain. The regent, contrary to his usual easy goodness, insisted, and the lovers had no hope, when an unexpected event broke it off. Madame, the mother of the regent, with her German frankness, had written to the Queen of Sicily, one of her most constant correspondents, that she loved her too much not to warn her that the princess, who was destined for the young prince, had a lover, and that that lover was the Duc de Richelieu. It may be supposed that this declaration put an end to the scheme. The regent was at first excessively angry at this result of his mother's mania for writing letters, but he soon began to laugh at this epistolary escapade, and his attention was called off at the time by an important subject, namely that of Du Bois, who was determined to become an archbishop. We have seen how on Du Bois's return from London, the thing had first been broached under the form of a joke, and how the regent had received the recommendation of King George. But Du Bois was not a man to be beaten by a first refusal. Cambrai was vacant by the death of the Cardinal La Tremouille, and was one of the richest archbishoprics in the church. 150,000 francs a year were attached to it, and it was difficult to say whether Du Bois was most tempted by the title of successor to Fenelon or by the rich benefice. Du Bois, on the first opportunity, brought it again on the tapis. The regent again tried to turn it off with a joke, but Du Bois became more positive and more pressing. The regent, thinking to settle it, defied Du Bois to find a prelate who would consecrate him. "Is it only that?" cried Du Bois joyously. "Then I have the man at hand." "Impossible," said the regent. "You will see," said Du Bois, and he ran out. In 5 minutes he returned. "Well," asked the regent. "Well," answered Du Bois, "I have got him." "And who is the scoundrel who is willing to consecrate such another scoundrel as you?" "Your first almoner, Monseigneur, the Bishop of Nantes, neither more nor less. Trésan himself." "Impossible. Here he is." And at this moment the door was opened, and the Bishop of Nantes was announced. "Come," cried Du Bois, running to him. "His Royal Highness honors us both in naming me Archbishop of Cambrai, and in choosing you to consecrate me." "M. de Nantes," asked the regent, "is it true that you consent to make the abbé an archbishop?" "Your Highness's wishes are commands from me. Do you know that he is neither deacon, archdeacon, nor priest?" "Never mind, Monseigneur," cried Du Bois. "Here is M. de Trésan, who will tell you all these orders may be conferred in a day. But there is no example of such a thing." "Yes, Saint Ambroise." "Then, my dear abbé," said the regent, laughing, "if you have all the fathers of the church with you, I have nothing more to say, and I abandon you to M. de Trésan. I will give him back to you with the cross and mitre, Monseigneur. But you must have the grade of licentiate," continued the regent, who began to be amused at the discussion. "I have a promise from the University of Orleans. But you must have attestations. Is there not, Bezins? A certificate of good life and manners. I will have one signed by Noailles." "No, I defy you, abbé." "Then your Highness will give me one. The signature of the Regent of France must have as much weight at Rome as that of a wicked cardinal." "Du Bois," said the regent, "a little more respect, if you please, for the princes of church." "You are right, Monseigneur. There is no saying what one may become." "You a cardinal?" cried the regent, laughing. "Certainly. I do not see why I should not be pope some day." "Well, Borgia was one. May God give us both a long life, Monseigneur, and you will see that in many other things." "Pardieu," said the regent, "you know that I laugh at death." "Alas, too much." "Well, you will make a poltroon of me by curiosity. It would be none the worse. And to commence, Monseigneur would do well to discontinue his nocturnal excursions." "Why?" "In the first place, because they endanger his life." "What does that matter?" "Then for another reason." "What?" "Because," said Du Bois, assuming a hypocritical air, "they are a subject of scandal for the church." "Go to the devil." "You see, monsieur," said Du Bois, turning to Trésan, "in the midst of what libertines and hardened sinners I am obliged to live. I hope that your eminence will consider my position, and will not be too severe upon me." "We will do our best, monsieur," said Trésan. "And when?" asked Du Bois, who was unwilling to lose an hour. "As soon as you are ready." "I ask for 3 days." "Very well. On the 4th I shall be at your orders. Today is Saturday. On Wednesday, then." "On Wednesday," answered Trésan. "Only I warn you beforehand, abbé," answered the regent, "that one person of some importance will be absent at your consecration." "And who will dare to do me that injury?" "I shall." "You, Monseigneur, you will be there and in your official gallery." "I say not." I bet 1,000 Louis. And I give you my word of honor. I double my bet. Insolent. On Wednesday, M. de Tressan, at my consecration, Monseigneur, and Du Bois left the room highly delighted, and spread about everywhere the news of his nomination. Still, Du Bois was wrong on one point, namely, the adhesion of the Cardinal de Noailles. No menace or promise could draw from him the attestation to good life and morals which Du Bois flattered himself he should obtain at his hands. It is true that he was the only one who dared to make this holy and noble opposition to the scandal with which the church was menaced. The University of Orleans gave the licenses, and everything was ready on the appointed day. Du Bois left at 5 o'clock in the morning, in a hunting dress, for Potowix, where he found de Tressan, who, according to his promise, bestowed on him the deaconship, the archdeaconship, and the priesthood. At 12 all was finished, and at 4, after having attended the Regent's Council, which was held at the Old Louvre in consequence of the measles having, as we have said, attacked the Tuileries, Du Bois returned home in the dress of an archbishop. The first person whom he saw in his room was La Filin. In her double quality of attaché to his secret police and to his public loves, she had admittance to his room at all hours, and in spite of the solemnity of the day, as she had said that she had business of importance to communicate, they had not dared to refuse her. "Ah!" cried Du Bois, on perceiving his old friend. "A lucky meeting." "Pardieu, my dear gossip," answered La Filin. "If you are ungrateful enough to forget your old friends, I am not stupid enough to forget mine, particularly when they rise in the world." "Ah, tell me," said Du Bois, beginning to pull off his sacerdotal ornaments, "do you count on continuing to call me your gossip now that I am an archbishop?" "More than ever. And I count on it so strongly that the first time the regent enters my house, I shall ask him for an abbey, that we may still be on equality one with the other." "He comes to your house, then?" "The libertine." "Alas, no more, my dear gossip." "Ah, the good time is past. But I hope that, thanks to you, it will return and that the house will feel your elevation." "Oh, my poor gossip," said Du Bois, stooping down in order that La Filin might unclasp his frock. "You see that now things are much changed, and that I can no longer visit you as I used to. You are proud. Philippe comes there. Philippe is only Regent of France, and I am an archbishop. Do you understand? I want a mistress at a house where I can go without scandal, like Madame de Tencin, for example. Yes, who will deceive you for Richelieu. And how? On the contrary, do you know that she will not deceive Richelieu for me? Heyday! And will she manage your police and your love at the same time?" "Perhaps. But apropos of police," answered Du Bois, continuing to undress, "do you know that yours is up infernally during 3 or 4 months, and that if this continues I shall be obliged to withdraw you from the superintendence?" "Ah, diable!" cried La Filin. "This is the way you treat your old friends. I come to make a revelation. Well, you shall not know it. A revelation. And what about? Pshaw! Take away my superintendence. Scoundrel that you are. Is it relating to Spain?" asked the archbishop, frowning, and feeling instinctively that the danger came from thence. "It relates to nothing at all. Good evening." And La Filin made toward the door. "Come here," said Du Bois, stepping toward his desk. And the two old friends, who understood each other so well, looked toward each other and laughed. "Come, come," said La Filin. "I see that all is not lost, and that there is yet some good in you. Come, open this little desk and show me what it contains, and I will open my mouth and show you what I have in my heart." Du Bois took out a rouleau of 100 Louis and showed it to La Filin. "How much is it?" said she. "Come, tell the truth. However, I shall count after you, to be sure." 2,400 francs. That is a pretty penny, it seems to me. "Yes, for an abbé, but not for an archbishop. Do you not know to what extent the finances are involved? Well, what does that matter, you humbug, when law is going to make millions for us? Would you like in exchange 10,000 francs in Mississippi bonds?" "Thanks, my dear, I prefer the 100 Louis. Give them to me. I am a good woman, and another day you'll be more generous." "Well, what have you to tell me? Come, first promise me one thing." "What is it?" that as it is about an old friend, he shall come to no harm. But if your old friend is a beggar who deserves to be hanged, why should you cheat him of his due? I have my own reasons. Go along, I promise nothing. Well, good evening, then. Here are the 100 louis. Ah, you are getting scrupulous all at once. Not all, but I am under obligations to this man. He started me in the world. He may boast of having done a good thing for society that day. Rather, my friend, and he shall never have cause to repent it, for I will not speak a word today unless his life is safe. Well, safe it shall be. I promise you. Are you content? By what do you promise it me? On the faith of an honest man. Ah, you are going to deceive me. Do you know that you are very tiresome? Oh, I am very tiresome. Well, goodbye. Gossip, I will have you arrested. What do I care? You shall be sent to prison. That is a good joke. I will leave you to die there, till you do it yourself. It will not be long. Well, what do you want? My captain's life. You shall have it. On what faith? On the faith of an archbishop. I want a better. On the faith of an abbé. Better still. On the faith of Du Bois. That will do. First, I must tell you that my captain is the most out at elbows of any in the kingdom. Diable, he has a rival. Still, he will have the prize. Continue. Well, you must know that lately he has become as rich as Croesus. He must have robbed some millionaire. Incapable. Killed maybe, but robbed. What do you take him for? Do you know where the money comes from? Do you know the different coinages? Yes. Where does this come from, then? Ah, a Spanish doubloon. And without alloy, with the effigy of King Charles II, doubloons which are worth 48 francs if they are worth a penny, and which run from his pockets like a stream. Poor dear fellow. And when did he begin to sweat gold? The day after the regent was nearly carried off in the Rue de Bones Enfants. Do you understand the apologue, gossip? Yes. And why have you not told me before today? Because his pockets were full then. They are now nearly empty, which is a time to find out where he will fill them again. And you wish to give him time to empty them? Well, all the world must live. And so they shall, even your captain. But you understand that I must know what he does. Day by day. And which of your girls does he love? All when he has money. And when he has none? La Normande. I know her. She is as sharp as a needle. Yes, but you must not reckon on her. Why not? She loves him, the little fool. Ah, he is a lucky fellow. And he merits it. He has got the heart of a prince, not like you, old miser. Oh, you know that sometimes I am worse than the prodigal son, and it depends on you to make me so. I will do my best. Then day by day I shall know what your captain does. You shall. On what faith? On the faith of an honest woman. Something better. On the faith of Philin. That will do. Adieu, Monseigneur the Archbishop. Adieu, gossip. La Philin was going toward the door, when at that moment an usher entered. Monseigneur, said he, here's a man who wants to speak to your eminence. And who is he, idiot? An employee of the Royal Library, who, in his spare time, makes copies. And what does he want? He says that he has an important revelation to make to your eminence. Oh, it is some poor fellow begging. No, Monseigneur. He says that it is a political affair. Diable. About what? Relative to Spain. Send him in. And you, gossip, go into this closet. What for? Suppose my writer and your captain should know each other? Ah, that would be droll. Come, get in quickly. La Philin entered the closet, which Du Bois showed her. An instant afterward, the usher opened the door and announced Monsieur Jean Buvat. We must now show how this important personage came to be received in private audience by the Archbishop of Cambrai. Chapter 29. The Prince de Listnay's Accomplice. We left Buvat going up to his own room, with his papers in his hand, to fulfill his promise to the Prince de Listnay, and this promise was so scrupulously kept that by 7 o'clock the next evening the copy was finished and taken to the Rue du Bac. He then received from the same august hand some more work, which he returned with the same punctuality, so that the Prince de Lisney, feeling confidence in a man who had given such proofs of exactitude, gave him at once sufficient papers to necessitate an interval of 3 or 4 days between this interview and the next. Beauvat was delighted with this mark of confidence, and on his return set himself gaily to his work, and, although he found that he did not understand a word of Spanish, he could now read it fluently, and had become so accustomed to it that he felt quite disappointed when he found among the copies one all in French. It had no number, and almost appeared to have slipped in by mistake, but he resolved, nevertheless, to copy it. He began with these lines: "Confidential. For His Excellency Monsieur Alberoni in person. Nothing is more important than to make sure of the places near the Pyrenees, and the noblemen who reside in these cantons." "In these cantons," repeated Beauvat, after having written it. Then, taking a hair from his pen, he continued, "To gain or master the garrison of Bayonne." "What is that?" said Beauvat. "Is not Bayonne a French town? Let us see, let us see." And he continued, "The Marquis de P is governor of D. One knows the intentions of that nobleman. When it is decided, it will be necessary for him to triple his expenditure in order to attract the aristocracy. He ought to scatter rewards. In Normandy, Charenton is an important post. Pursue the same course with the governor of that town as with the Marquis of P. Go further. Promise his officers suitable rewards. Do the same in all the provinces." "Hello!" cried Beauvat, rereading what he had just written. "What does this mean? It seems to me that it would be prudent to read it all before going further." He read, "To supply this expenditure, one ought to be able to reckon on at least 300,000 francs the first month, and afterward 100,000 per month, pay to the day." "Pay to the day," murmured Beauvat, breaking off. "It is evidently not by France that these payments are to be made, since France is so poor that she has not paid me my 900 francs salary for 5 years. Let us see, let us see." And he recommenced, "That expenditure, which will cease at the peace, will enable His Catholic Majesty to act with certainty in case of war. Spain will only be an auxiliary. The army of Philip V is in France." What? Cried Beauvat, "and I did not even know that it crossed the frontier. The army of Philip V is in France. A body of about 10,000 Spaniards is more than sufficient with the presence of the king. But we must be able to count on being able to seduce over at least half of the Duc d'Orleans' army." Beauvat trembled. "This is the most important, and cannot be done without money. A present of 100,000 francs is necessary for each battalion or squadron. 20 battalions would be 2 millions. With that, someone might form a trustworthy army and destroy that of the enemy. It is almost certain that the subjects most devoted to the King of Spain will not be employed in the army which will march against him. Let them disperse themselves through provinces. There they will act usefully. To resupply them with a character, if they have none, it will be necessary for His Catholic Majesty to send his orders in blank, for his minister in Paris to fill up, in consequence of the multiplicity of orders. It would be better if the ambassador had the power to sign for the King of Spain. It would be well, moreover, if His Majesty were to sign his orders as a French prince. The title is his own. Prepare funds for an army of 30,000 men, whom His Majesty will find brave, skillful, and disciplined. This money should arrive in France at the end of May or the commencement of June, and be distributed directly in the capitals of provinces, such as Nantes, Bayonne, etc. Do not allow the French ambassador to leave Spain. His presence will answer for the safety of those who declare themselves." "Sabre de bois!" cried Beauvat, rubbing his eyes. "But this is a conspiracy against the person of the regent and against the safety of the kingdom." Oh! Beauvat fell into profound meditation. Indeed, the position was critical. Beauvat mixed up in a conspiracy. Beauvat charged with a state secret. Beauvat holding in his hands, perhaps, the fate of nations. A smaller thing would have thrown him into a state of strained perplexity. The seconds, minutes, hours flowed away, and Beauvat remained on his chair, his head drooping, his eyes fixed on the floor and perfectly still. From time to time, however, a deep breath, like an expression of astonishment, escaped his breast. 10 o'clock, 11 midnight sounded. Buvat thought that the night would bring him aid, and he determined to go to bed. It is needless to say that his copying came to an end when he saw that the original was assuming an illegal character. Buvat could not sleep. The poor fellow tossed from side to side, but scarcely had he shut his eyes before he saw this horrible plan of the conspiracy written upon the wall in letters of fire. Once or twice, overcome by fatigue, he fell asleep, but he had no sooner lost consciousness than he dreamed the first time that he was arrested by the watch as a conspirator, the second that he was stabbed by the conspirators themselves. The first time Buvat awoke trembling, the second time bathed in perspiration. These two impressions had been so terrible that he lighted his candle and determined to wait for day without another attempt to sleep. The day came, but far from dispelling the phantoms of the night, it only gave a more terrific reality. At the least noise, Buvat trembled. Someone knocked at the street door. Buvat thought he should faint. Nanette opened his room door, and he uttered a cry. Nanette ran to him and asked what was the matter, but he contented himself with shaking his head and answering with a sigh. "Ah, my poor Nanette, we live in very sad times." He stopped directly, fearing he had said too much. He was too preoccupied to go down to breakfast with Bathilde. Besides, he feared lest the young girl should perceive his uneasiness and ask the cause, and as he did not know how to keep anything from her, he would have told her all, and she would then have become his accomplice. He had his coffee sent up to him, under pretext of having an overwhelming amount of work to do, and that he was going to work during breakfast. As Bathilde's love profited by this absence, she was rather pleased at it than otherwise. A few minutes before 10, Buvat left for his office. His fears had been strong in his own house, but once in the street, they changed into terrors. At every crossing, at the end of every court, behind every angle, he thought that he saw the police officers waiting for him. At the corner of the place de Victoires, a musketeer appeared, coming from the Rue Pagevin, and Buvat gave such a start on seeing him that he almost fell under the wheels of a carriage. At last, after many alarms, he reached the library, bowed almost to the ground before the sentinel, darted up the stairs, gained his office, and falling exhausted on his seat, he shut up in his drawer all the papers of the Prince de Lisney, which he had brought with him, for fear the police should search his house during his absence, and finding himself in safety, heaved a sigh which would not have failed in denouncing him to his colleagues as being a prey to the greatest agitation, if he had not, as usual, arrived the first. Buvat had a principle, which was that no personal preoccupation, whether grave or gay, ought to disturb a clerk in the execution of his duty. Therefore he set himself to his work, apparently as if nothing had happened, but really in a state of moral perturbation impossible to describe. This work consisted, as usual, in classifying and arranging books. There having been an alarm of fire 3 or 4 days before, the books had been thrown on the floor or carried out of reach of the flames, and there were consequently 4,000 or 5,000 volumes to be reinstated in their proper places. And, as it was a particularly tedious business, Buvat had been selected for it, and had hitherto acquitted himself with an intelligence and assiduity which had merited the commendations of his superiors and the raillery of his colleagues. In spite of the urgency of the work, Buvat rested some minutes to recover himself, but as soon as he saw the door open, he rose instinctively, took a pen, dipped in the ink, took a handful of parchment labels, and went toward the remaining books, took the first which came at hand, and continued his classification, murmuring between his teeth, as was his habit under similar circumstances. The Breviary of Lovers, printed at Liege in 1712. No printer's name. Ah, mon Dieu! What amusement can Christians possibly find in reading such books? It would be better if they were all burned in the Place de Grève by the hand of the public hangman. Chut! What name have I been pronouncing there? I wonder who this Prince de Lisney, who has made me copy such things, is, and the young man who, under pretense of doing me a service, introduced me to such a scoundrel. Come, this is not the place to think about that. How pleasant it is writing on parchment. The pen glides as if over silk. What is the next? Well, monsieur, said the head clerk, and what have you been doing for the last 5 minutes? With your arms crossed and your eyes fixed? Nothing. De coudre, nothing. I was planning a new mode of classification. A new mode of classification. Are you turned reformer? Do you wish to commence a revolution, M. Buvat? Aye. A revolution, cried Buvat with terror. A revolution, monsieur. Never, oh, never. Good heavens, my devotion to Monseigneur the Regent is known. A disinterested devotion, since he has not paid me for 5 years, as you know. Well, go on with your work. Buvat continued. Conspiracy of Monsieur de Cinq-Mars, Diable. Diable, I have heard of that. He was a gallant gentleman who was in correspondence with Spain, that cursed Spain. What business has it to mix itself up eternally with our affairs? It is true that this time it is said that Spain will only be an auxiliary, but an ally who takes possession of our towns and who debauches our soldiers appears to me very much like an enemy. Conspiracy of Monsieur de Cinq-Mars, followed by a history of his death, and that of Monsieur de Thou, condemned for not revealing it, by an eyewitness. For not revealing. It is true, no doubt, for the law is positive. Whoever does not reveal is an accomplice, myself. For instance, I am the accomplice of the Prince de Lisney, and if they cut off his head, they will cut off mine too. No, they will only hang me. I am not noble. Hanged! It is impossible. They would never go to such extremities in my case. Besides, I will declare all. But then I shall be an informer. Never. But then I shall be hanged. Oh! What is the matter, Buvat? Said a clerk. You are strangling yourself by twisting your cravat. I beg your pardon, gentlemen, said Buvat. I did it mechanically. I did not mean to offend you. Buvat stretched out his hand for another book. Conspiracy of the Chevalier Louis de Rohan. Oh, I come to nothing but conspiracies. Copy of a plan of government found among the papers of Monsieur de Rohan, and entirely written by Van der Enden. Ah, mon Dieu! Yes, that is just my case. He was hanged for having copied a plan. Oh, I shall die. Procès verbal, the torture of Francis Affinius Van der Enden. If they read one day, at the end of the conspiracy of the Prince de Lisney, Procès verbal of the torture of Jean Buvat. Buvat began to read. Well, what is the matter, Buvat? Said de Coudray, seeing the good man shake and grow pale. Are you ill? I am. De Coudray, said Buvat, dropping the book and dragging himself to the seat. I am de Coudray. I feel I am going to faint. That comes of reading instead of working, said an employee. Well, Buvat, are you better? Asked de Coudray. Yes, monsieur, for my resolution is taken irrevocably. It would not be just, by heaven, that I should bear the punishment for a crime which I never committed. I owe it to society, to my ward, to myself. De Coudray, if the curator asks for me, you will tell him that I am gone out on pressing business. And Buvat drew the roll of paper from the drawer, pressed his hat onto his head, took his stick, and went out with the majesty of despair. Do you know where he has gone? Asked the employee. No, answered de Coudray. I will tell you, to play at bowls at the Champs-Élysées or at Porcherons. The employee was wrong. He had neither gone to the Champs-Élysées nor to Porcherons. He had gone to Du Bois. Chapter 30. The Fox and the Goose. Jean Buvat, said the usher. Du Bois stretched out his viper's head, darted a look at the opening which was left between the usher and the door, and behind the official introducer, perceived a little fat man, pale, and whose legs shook under him, and who coughed to give himself assurance. A glance sufficed to inform Du Bois the sort of person he had to deal with. Let him come in, said Du Bois. The usher went out, and Jean Buvat appeared at the door. Come in, said Du Bois. You do me honor, monsieur, murmured Buvat, without moving from his place. Shut the door and leave us, said Du Bois to the usher. The usher obeyed, and the door, striking the posterior part of Buvat, made him bound a little way forward. Buvat, shaken for an instant, steadied himself on his legs, and became once more movable, looking at Du Bois with an astounded expression. In truth, Du Bois was a curious sight. Of his episcopal costume he had retained the inferior part, so that he was in his shirt with black breeches and violet stockings. This disagreed with all Buvat's preconceived notions. What he had before his eyes was neither a minister nor an archbishop, but seemed much more like an orangutan than a man. Well, monsieur, said Du Bois, sitting down and crossing his legs, and taking his foot in his hand, you have asked to speak to me. Here I am. That is to say, said Buvat, I asked to speak to Monseigneur the Archbishop of Cambrai. Well, I am he. How? You, Monseigneur? Cried Buvat, taking his hat in both hands and bowing almost to the ground. Excuse me, but I did not recognize your eminence. It is true that this is the first time I have had the honor of seeing you. Still, at that air of majesty, hum, I ought to have understood. Your name? Asked Du Bois, interrupting the good man's compliments. Jean Buvat, at your service. You are an employee at the library, and you have some revelations to make to me concerning Spain? That is to say, Monseigneur, this is how it is. As my office work leaves me 6 hours in the evening and 4 in the morning, and as heaven has blessed me with a very good handwriting, I make copies. Yes, I understand, said Du Bois, and someone has given you suspicious papers to copy. So you have brought these suspicious papers to me, have you not? In this role, Monseigneur, in this role, said Buvat, extending it toward Du Bois. Du Bois made a single bound from his chair to Buvat, took the roll, and sat down at a desk, and in a turn of the hand, having torn off the string and the wrapper, found the papers in question. The first on which he lighted were in Spanish. But as Du Bois had been sent twice to Spain and knew something of the language of Calderon and Lopez de Vega, he saw at the first glance how important these papers were. Indeed, they were neither more nor less than the protestation of nobility, the list of officers who requested commissions under the King of Spain, and the manifesto prepared by the Cardinal de Polignac and the Marquis de Pompadour to rouse the kingdom. These different documents were addressed directly to Philip V. And a little note, which Du Bois recognized as Elamer's handwriting, announced that the denouement conspiracy was near hand. He informed His Catholic Majesty, from day to day, of all the important events which could advance or retard the scheme. Then came, finally, that famous plan of the conspirators which we have already given to our readers, and which, left by an oversight among the papers which had been translated into Spanish, had opened Buvat's eyes. Near the plan, in the good man's best writing, was the copy which he had begun to make, and which was broken off at the words, "Act thus in all the provinces." Buvat had followed all the working of Du Bois's face with a certain anxiety. He had seen it pass from astonishment to joy, then from joy to impassibility. Du Bois, as he continued to read, had passed, successively, one leg over the other, had bitten his lips, pinched the end of his nose, but all had been utterly untranslatable to Buvat. And at the end of the reading, he understood no more from the face of the Archbishop than he had understood at the end of the copy from the Spanish original. As to Du Bois, he saw that this man had come to furnish him with the beginning of a most important secret, and he was meditating on the best means of making him furnish the end also. This was the signification of the crossed legs, the bitten lips, and the pinched nose. At last he appeared to have taken his resolution. A charming benevolence overspread his countenance, and turning toward the good man, who had remained standing respectfully, "Take a seat, my dear M. Buvat," said he. "Thank you, Monseigneur," answered Buvat, trembling. "I am not fatigued." Pardon," said Du Bois, "but your legs shake." Indeed, since he had read the procès-verbal of the question of Van der Enden, Buvat had retained in his legs a nervous trembling, like that which may be observed in dogs that have just had the distemper. "The fact is, Monseigneur," said Buvat, "that I do not know what has come to me the last 2 hours, but I find a great difficulty in standing upright." "Sit down, then, and let us talk like two friends." Buvat looked at Du Bois with an air of stupefaction, which, at any other time, would have had the effect of making him burst out laughing, but now he did not seem to notice it, and taking a chair himself, he repeated with his hand the invitation which he had given with his voice. There was no means of drawing back. The good man approached trembling and sat down on the edge of his chair, put his hat on the ground, took his cane between his legs, and waited. All this, however, was not executed without a violent internal struggle, as his face testified, which, from being white as a lily when he came in, had now become as red as a peony. "My dear M. Buvat, you say that you make copies?" "Yes, Monseigneur." "And that brings you in?" "Very little, Monseigneur, very little." You have, nevertheless, a superb handwriting, M. Buvat. Yes, but all the world does not appreciate the value of that talent as your eminence does. That is true, but you are employed at the library. I have that honor. And your place brings you. Oh, my place. That is another thing, Monseigneur. It brings me in nothing at all, seeing that for 5 years the cashier has told us at the end of each month that the king was too poor to pay us. And you still remain in the service of His Majesty? That was well done, M. Buvat. That was well done. Buvat rose, saluted Du Bois, and reseated himself. And, perhaps, all the while you have a family to support, a wife, children? No, Monseigneur, I am a bachelor. But you have parents, at all events? No, Monseigneur, but I have a ward, a charming young person, full of talent, who sings like Mademoiselle Barry and who draws like Groys. Ah. And what is the name of your ward, and Buvat? Bathilde du Rocher, Monseigneur. She is a young person of noble family. Her father was squire to Monsieur the Regent, when he was still Duc de Chartres, and had the misfortune to be killed at the Battle of Almanza. Thus I see you have your charges, my dear Buvat. Is it of Bathilde that you speak, Monseigneur? Oh, no. Bathilde is not a charge. On the contrary, poor dear girl, she brings in more than she costs. Bathilde a charge. Firstly, every month M. Papillon, the color man at the corner of the Rue Cléry, you know, Monseigneur, gives her 80 francs for 2 drawings. Then, I should say, my dear Buvat, that you are not rich. Oh, rich? No, Monseigneur, I am not, but I wish I was, for poor Bathilde's sake. And if you could obtain from Monseigneur that out of first money which comes into state coffers he would pay me my arrears, or at least something on account. And to how much do your arrears amount? To 4,700 francs, 2 sous, and 8 centimes, Monseigneur. Is that all? Said Du Bois. How? Is that all, Monseigneur? Yes, that is nothing. Indeed, Monseigneur, it is a great deal, and the proof is that the king cannot pay it. But that will not make you rich. It will make me comfortable, and I do not conceal from you, Monseigneur, that if, from the first money which comes into the treasury, my dear Buvat, said Du Bois, I have something better than that to offer you. Offer it, Monseigneur. You have your fortune at your fingers' ends. My mother always told me so, Monseigneur. That proves, said Du Bois, what a sensible woman your mother was. Well, Monseigneur, I am ready. What must I do? Mon Dieu, the thing is very simple. You will make me now and here copies of all these. But, Monseigneur, that is not all, my dear Monsieur Buvat. You will take back to the person who gave you these papers the copies and the originals. You will take all that that person gives you. You will bring them to me directly, so that I may read them. Then you will do the same with other papers as with these, and so on indefinitely, till I say enough. But, Monseigneur, it seems to me that in acting thus I should betray the confidence of the prince. It is with a prince that you have business, Monsieur Buvat. And what may this prince be called? Oh, Monseigneur, it appears to me that in telling you his name I denounce. Well, and what have you come here for, then? Monseigneur, I have come here to inform you of the danger which his highness runs. That is all. Indeed, said Du Bois in a bantering tone. And you imagine you're going to stop there? I wish to do so, Monseigneur. There is only one misfortune, that it is impossible, my dear Monsieur Buvat. Why impossible? Entirely. Monseigneur, I am an honest man. M. Buvat, you are a fool. Monseigneur, I still wish to keep silence. My dear monsieur, you will speak. And if I speak, I shall be the informer against the prince. If you do not speak, you are his accomplice. His accomplice, Monseigneur. And of what crime? Of the crime of high treason. The police have had their eyes on you this long time. M. Buvat. On me, Monseigneur. Yes, on you. Under the pretext that they do not pay you your salary, you entertain seditious proposals against the state. Oh, Monseigneur, how can they say so? under the pretext of their not paying you your salary. You have been making copies of incendiary documents for the last 4 days. Monseigneur, I only found out yesterday. I do not understand Spanish. You do understand it, monsieur? I swear, Monseigneur. I tell you, you do understand it, and the proof is that there is not a mistake in your copies. But that is not all. How, not all? No, that is not all. Is it Spanish? Look, monsieur. And he read, "Nothing is more important than to make sure the place is in the neighborhood of the Pyrenees and the noblemen who reside in the cantons. But, Monseigneur, it was just by that I made the discovery. Buvat, they have sent men to the galleys for less than you have done. Monseigneur, Buvat, men have been hanged who were less guilty than you. Monseigneur, Buvat, they have been broken on the wheel. Mercy, Monseigneur, mercy. Mercy to a criminal like you, Buvat. I shall send you to the Bastille, and Mademoiselle Bathilde to Saint Lazare. To Saint Lazare. Bathilde at Saint Lazare, Monseigneur. Bathilde at Saint Lazare. And who has the right to do that? I Buvat. No, Monseigneur, you have not the right, cried Buvat, who could fear and suffer everything for himself, but who, at the thought of such infamy, from a worm became a serpent. Bathilde is not a daughter of the people, Monseigneur. Bathilde is a lady of noble birth, the daughter of a man who saved the life of the regent. And when I represent His Highness, you will go first to the Bastille, Buvat, said Du Bois, pulling the bell so as nearly to break it. And then we shall see about Mademoiselle Bathilde. Monseigneur, what are you doing? You will see. The usher entered. An officer of police and a carriage. Monseigneur, cried Buvat, all that you wish. Do as I bid you, said Du Bois. The usher went out. Monseigneur, said Buvat, joining his hands. Monseigneur, I will obey. No, Buvat. Ah, you wish a trial. You shall have one. You want a rope. You shall not be disappointed. Monseigneur, cried Buvat, falling on his knees, what must I do? Hang, continued Du Bois. Monseigneur, said the usher, returning. The carriage is at the door, and the officer in the anteroom. Monseigneur, said Buvat, twisting his little legs, and tearing out the few yellow hairs which he had left. Monseigneur, will you be pitiless? Ah, you will not tell me the name of the prince. It is the Prince de Lisney, Monseigneur. Ah, you will not tell me his address. He lives at number 110, Rue du Bac, Monseigneur. You will not make me copies of those papers? I will do it. I will do it this instant, said Buvat, and he went and sat down before the desk, took a pen, dipped it in the ink, and taking some paper, began the first page with a superb capital. I will do it, Monseigneur. Only you will allow me to write to Bathilde that I shall not be home to dinner. Bathilde at the Saint Lazare, murmured Buvat between his teeth. Sabre de bois. He would have done as he said. Yes, monsieur, I would have done that, and more too, for the safety of the state, as you will find out to your cost, if you do not return these papers, and if you do not take the others, and if you do not bring a copy here every evening. But, Monseigneur, cried Buvat in despair, I cannot then go to my office. Well then, do not go to your office. Not go to my office. But I have not missed a day for 12 years, Monseigneur. Well, I give you a month's leave. But I shall lose my place, Monseigneur. What will that matter to you, since they do not pay you? But the honor of being a public functionary, Monseigneur. And moreover, I love my books, I love my table, I love my hair seat, cried Buvat, ready to cry. And to think that I shall lose it all. Well then, if you wish to keep your books, your table, and your chair, I should advise you to obey me. Have I not already put myself at your service? Then you will do what I wish. Everything. Without breathing a word to anyone. I will be dumb. Not even to Mademoiselle Bathilde. To her less than anyone, Monseigneur. That is well. On that condition I pardon you. Oh, Monseigneur, I shall forget your fault. Monseigneur is too good. And perhaps I'll even reward you. Oh, Monseigneur, what magnanimity! Well, well, set to work. I am ready, Monseigneur. I am ready. And Buvat began to write in his most flowing hand, and never moving his eyes, except from the original to the copy, and staying from time to time to wipe his forehead, which was covered with perspiration. Du Bois profited by his industry to open the closet for La Filin, and signing to her to be silent, he led her toward the door. Well, gossip, whispered she, for in spite of his caution, she could not restrain her curiosity. Where is your writer? There he is, said Du Bois, showing Buvat, who, leaning over his paper, was working away industriously. What is he doing? Guess. How should I know? Then you want me to tell you? Yes. Well, he is making my cardinal's hat. La Filin uttered such an exclamation of surprise that Buvat started and turned round, but Du Bois had already pushed her out of the room, again recommending her to send him daily news of the captain. But the reader will ask what Bathilde and Harmental were doing all this time. Nothing, they were happy. Chapter 31. A chapter of St. Simon. For days passed thus, during which Buvat, remaining absent from the office on pretext of indisposition, succeeded in completing the 2 copies, one for the Prince de Lisney, the other for Du Bois. During these 4 days, certainly the most agitated of his life, he was so taciturn and gloomy that Bathilde several times asked him what was the matter, but as he always answered nothing, and began to sing his little song, Bathilde was easily deceived, particularly as he still left every morning as if to go to the office, so that she saw no material alteration from his ordinary habits. As to Harmental, he received every morning a visit from the Abbé Brigard, announcing that everything was going on right. And as his own love affairs were quite as prosperous, Harmental began to think that to be a conspirator was the happiest thing on the earth. As to the Duc d'Orléans, suspecting nothing, he continued his ordinary life, and had invited the customary guests to his Sunday supper, when in the afternoon Du Bois entered his room. "Oh, it is you, Abbé. I was going to send to you to know if you were going to make one of us tonight." "You are going to have a supper then, Monseigneur?" asked Du Bois. "Where you come from with your fast day face? Is not today Sunday?" "Yes, Monseigneur." "Well, then, come back to us. Here is a list of the guests. Nos, Lafer, Fargy, Ravan, Broy. I do not invite Brancas. He has been wearisome for some days. I think he must be conspiring. Then La Faloris and Diverne. They cannot bear each other. They will tear out each other's eyes, and that will amuse us. Then we shall have La Souris, and perhaps Madame de Sabrin, if she has no appointment with Richelieu. This is your list, Monseigneur?" "Yes." "Well, will your Highness look at mine now? Have you made one, too?" "No, it was brought to me ready-made." "What is this?" asked the regent, looking at a paper which Du Bois presented to him. "Nominal list of the officers who request commissions in the Spanish army. Claude Francois Doret, Knight of St. Louis, Field Marshal and Colonel of Cavalry, Baschet, Knight of St. Louis, and Colonel of Infantry, de Sabrin, de La Rochefoucauld Gondrel, de Villeneuve, de Lescure, de Laval. Well, what next? Here's another." And he presented a second letter to the Duke. "Protestation of the nobility. Make your list. Monseigneur, you are not the only one. You see, the Prince de Celamare has his also. Sign without distinction of ranks, so that there may be no dissatisfaction. De Viewpont, de La Pelletrie, de Beaufremont, de La Tour du Pin, de Montauban, Louis de Calmont, Claude de Polignac, Charles de Laval, Antoine de Chastellux, Armand de Richelieu. Where did you fish up all this, you old fox? Wait. Monseigneur, we have not done yet. Look at this. Plan of the conspirators. Nothing is more important than to make sure of the strong places near the Pyrenees, to gain the garrison of Bayonne, surrender our towns, give the keys of France into the hands of the Spanish. What does this mean, Du Bois? Patience, Monseigneur. We have better than that to show you. We have here the letters from His Majesty Philip V himself, to the King of France, but these are only copies. I will tell you soon where the originals are. Let us see, my dear Abbé, let us see. Since Providence has placed me on the throne of Spain, etc., etc., in what light can your faithful subjects regard a treaty which is signed against me, etc., etc.? I beg your Majesty to convoke the States General of the kingdom. Convoke the States General. In whose name? In the name of Philip V. Philip V is King of Spain and not of France. Let him keep to his own character. I crossed the Pyrenees once to secure him on his throne. I might cross him a second time to remove him from it. We will think of that later. I do not say no, but for the present we have the fifth piece to read, and not the least important, as you will see. And Du Bois presented another paper to the regent, which he opened with such impatience that he tore it in opening it. Never mind, said Du Bois. The pieces are good. Put them together and read them. The regent did so and read, Dearly and well-beloved. Ah, said the regent. It is a question of my deposition, and these letters, I suppose, were to be given to the king? Tomorrow, Monseigneur. By whom? The marshal. Villeroy? Himself. How did he determine on such a thing? It was not he, it was his wife, Monseigneur. Another of Richelieu's tricks? You are right, Monseigneur. And from whom do you get these papers? From a poor writer to whom they have been given to be copied, since, thanks to a descent made on Laval's house, a press which had hidden in the cellar has ceased to work. And this writer is in direct communication with Celimare, the idiots. Not at all, Monseigneur. Their measures are better taken. The good man has only had to deal with the Prince de Lisney. Prince de Lisney. Who is he? Rue du Bac, 110. I do not know him. Yes, you do, Monseigneur. Where have I seen him? In your antechamber. What? This pretended Prince de Lisney is no other than that scoundrel Davranches, Madame de Maine's valet de chamber. Ah, I was astonished that she was not in it. Oh, she is at the head, and if Monseigneur would like to be rid of her and her clique, we have them all. Let us attend to the most pressing. Yes, let's think of Villeroy. Have you decided on a bold stroke? Certainly. So long as you confine yourself to parading about like a man at a theater or a tournament, very well. So long as you confine yourself to calumnies and impertinences against me, very good. But when it becomes a question of the peace and tranquility of France, you will find, Monsieur le Marechal, that you have already compromised him sufficiently by your military inaptitude, and we shall not give you an opportunity of doing so again by your political follies. Then, said Du Bois, we must lay hold of him? Yes, but with certain precautions. We must take him in the act. Nothing easier. He goes every morning at 8 o'clock to the king. Yes. Be tomorrow at 7:30 at Versailles. Well, you will go to his majesty before him. Very well. The regent and Du Bois talked for some little time longer, after which Du Bois took his leave. There is no supper this evening, said Du Bois to the usher. Give notice to the guests. The regent is ill. That evening at 9 o'clock, the regent left the Palais Royal, and, contrary to his ordinary habit, slept at Versailles.